Okay, Chairman, we are now live on YouTube.
Chairman, you're on mute.
There's a saying for 2021. Anyway, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's Planning and Environmental Protection Committee. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this video via the Council's YouTube page. Due to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely. A decision summary and minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the Council's YouTube page. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the committee to keep their video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting, but keep your microphone muted except when I ask you to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. If you wish to speak, then please raise your virtual hand, which is the blue hand and is located at the bottom of the participants section. Some people may have a newer version of Zoom, in which case the raised hand function has moved from the participants section to the reaction section and is now yellow. Whichever version you're using, please ensure you use your raised hands function to indicate that you wish to speak. As with all new arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there is always a risk that we may run into technical problems. For that, I would ask for your patience. If this should occur, I would declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. I'll begin the meeting by doing a roll call of all members of the committee. If members please confirm your attendance. Councillor Bond.
Present.
Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Coles.
Present.
Councillor Simons.
Present.
Councillor Hogg.
Present.
Councillor Hussain.
Present.
Councillor Iqbal.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
Present.
Councillor Rush.
Present.
Councillor Warren.
Present.
Thank you. And myself, Councillor Harper. We also have in attendance today Nick Harding, Head of Planning, Stephen Turnbull, Planning Solicitor, Nick Graves, the Highways Officer, and the members of the Democratic Services team. Item 1 then is apologies for absence. Karen?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Hiller and Casey. Councillor Coles and Councillor Simons are here as substitutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Coles and Councillor Simons, for standing in. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. In the report, it mentions the RSPB. I am a member of the RSPB, but I have no pecuniary interests.
Thank you, Councillors. Councillor Jones.
For the sake of clarity, I have a parking pass at Ferry Meadows, but that won't influence me, and I'll approach this with an open mind.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Any further declarations? No. Item 3 then is declaration to make representation as the ward councillor.
Hello, I'm Councillor Day here.
Right.
I'm going to be...
You don't have to. It's all right. Thank you, Councillor.
Oh, right, okay.
We've got you down. This is actually to committee, but thank you very much. We know you're here. Thank you. Right. Any others? No. Okay. Item 4 then relates to the minutes of the previous meeting on the 26th of January and also the previous meeting on the 23rd of February 2021. We've been asked to approve those minutes. Can I ask for proposer and seconder firstly on the 26th of January?
I'm happy to do that, Chair.
Councillor Jones is proposing. Have a seconder, please.
I'll second it, Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown, thank you. Fine. And also I'll have a proposer as well, please, for the 23rd of February.
Happy to do that as well, if you wish.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And the seconder?
And myself, yeah.
Councillor Brown. Okay, fine. Okay, are there any objections to any of those minutes at all? Okay, I see no hands, so we will move on. Both of those minutes are agreed and approved. Item 5 then is development control and enforcement matters. Now, before I go any further, I must ask committee, as you know, I'm sure you've seen the reports that have come out. We have quite a few speakers wishing to address you, both from a supporting side and also an objection side to this particular or the next particular item. So I must ask your permission. I'm intending to give both sides 30 minutes total time to address you, and for you to, obviously, and you can have questions at the end. So are we agreed? Will you agree to that I have 30 minutes for both sides? Councillor Jones?
In the interests of fairness, Chair, may I ask that if we've had speakers in the past that have dominated the whole of that time, I just ask, please, that if there are more than one speaker, that they apportion the time equally for those wishing to speak. That's all I would request, please.
Okay. Just so you know, we've looked into that, obviously, and I totally agree with that. It's happened before, that each speaker has been told they'll have 5 minutes each. And should we get to the end of or to close towards the 30 minutes and any time left, then obviously anybody who wants to carry on can. Is that okay? So that's fine. So no other problems? Okay, then we'll agree that. Okay, just to inform you also, committee, that councillors Aitken and Howell are also in attendance. They are ward councillors, however, they are not speaking on the Ferry Meadows item. These councillors will then turn their camera off during the vote. Moving on to item 5.1 then, which is the Ferry Meadows Country Park application. Mr. Harding, please, will you introduce the item?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Before I start the presentation, just by way of reminder that we do have an awful lot of representations on this application, both for and against, but members need to be focused on how this development proposal matches up against planning policy and planning guidance, and also any other material planning considerations. And you shouldn't be swayed purely by the number of representations either for or against the proposal. It's all about the planning policy and guidance and the material planning considerations. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this plan with the red edge shows the extent of the application site. Next slide, please. And here is an aerial photograph of the site in question. The proposed sort of climbing wall facility, which incorporates ancillary items such as changing rooms, cafes, seating areas, viewing areas, and the like, is going to be located on what is the existing car park that you see relatively central to the slide. And that car park that you see is going to be relocated to an area to the south. So if we move to the next slide, please. So this outlines the development proposal. As you can see, the climbing wall building, which is sort of the oblong shaped building in brown, sits on top of what is an existing 130 space car park. And just to the south of that building, you'll see a small number of car parking spaces. That's 10 accessible car parking spaces going to be conveniently located next door to the entrance to the building. And a replacement car park for the one being lost by the development is going to be located to the south. And you can see that quite clearly on this particular slide. So this new car park is going to provide for some 225 standard spaces. It's also going to incorporate minibus parking spaces and some further accessible car parking spaces. And what you've got compared to existing is an uplift of some 85 additional spaces. As expected, cycle parking is also proposed as part of this scheme. Next slide, please. This particular slide shows the trees and shrubs and hedgerows that are going to be lost to the scheme. They're highlighted in red, and as part of the landscaping proposals, replacement planting is going to be provided. So in the case of trees being lost, you're going to see at least 70 replacement trees being planted to offset those being lost. The footprint of the building proposed is sort of 60 metres by 23 metres. And if we go to the next slide, please. So this shows a pictorial of the proposed building, which has a sort of a church-like appearance with its sort of main horizontal feature and what I'll call the sort of the tower or the spire section. As you can see on the top section of the slide, what you've got in the sort of darker outline is the existing water sports centre. And that water sports centre has a height of approximately 10 metres. And in comparison to the sort of spire section of the proposed climbing wall building, that sits at 34 metres. So it's just over 3 times the height of the existing water sports centre. So it gives you a sense of scale. In terms of the section of the climbing building that sits adjacent to the spire, as you can see, the lower section of that roof comes down to meet the base of the spire. And at that point where the two sections intersect, that's got a height of approximately 10 metres. So that's of a similar scale to the water sports building. And if you look at the left-hand side of the climbing wall building, the roof ridge rises up to a maximum height of 14 metres. So that gives you a sort of sense of scale of the proposed structure. Next slide, please. As you can see, it's a very interesting design that's being proposed. Clearly, it is of a significant scale, which is necessary by the very nature of the use. But I think that the architectural sort of design of the proposed building does introduce a very interesting architectural feature into the park environment. Next slide, please. The proposed opening hours of the climbing wall facility are as follows: Monday to Friday, 7 AM to 10 PM, Saturdays, 8:30 to 10 PM, bank holidays and Sundays, 9:30 to 10 PM. And it's been estimated by the applicant that this new facility will attract over 100,000 visitors per annum, and that it will generate approximately £2 million for the local economy. So as you can appreciate, that is significant. What you'll see from this particular slide is that the building, in terms of its floor height, is elevated above existing ground level. And one of the reasons for that is because this building is being sited within flood zones 2 and 3. And therefore, there's the need to protect the property from that flood risk. But in addition, there's the need to ensure that the flood capacity of the existing site isn't unnecessarily compromised. And through the design of the building, with it being sort of elevated above existing ground level, and the use of permeable paving materials in the area around the proposed building, the water storage capacity compared to existing has been increased. And therefore, we are satisfied that the proposal is okay in terms of its flood resilience and in terms of it not taking away flood storage capacity. Next slide, please. Here's another sort of end elevation. So the elevation on the left-hand side is the one that you would see if you were coming out of the water sports building. Next slide, please. And here's the reverse side. Next slide, please. And here's a sort of a plan of the inside of the building at ground floor. So as you can see, it's got a mixture of climbing wall facilities, changing rooms, toilets, and meeting areas. Next slide, please. Again, more of the climbing facilities plus viewing areas available. Next slide, please. And now we move into photographs of the site and its surroundings. So this is sort of Ham Lane. As you can see in this picture, a building, and that's the corner of the existing water sports centre. And what you can see on your right-hand side in the foreground is the existing surplus car parking, overflow car parking. And beyond the tree which sits in the middle of this particular picture is going to be the area which is proposed for the 225 space car park. Next slide, please. And this is a view through an existing cut through from Ham Lane into the area where the new car parking area is proposed. So it extends up to as far as the trees that you see in the sort of foreground of this particular picture. Next slide, please. And this is sort of coming into the sort of entrance proper to the water sports centre. So you've got the turning off to the left there, that goes into the what I call the sort of small car parking and boatyard area. You can see the toilet block on your right hand side, and where you see the cars all parked in the sort of background, that's where the proposed building, climbing wall building, is going to be. Next slide, please. So this is at the far end of the car park, looking back towards the toilet block on your left-hand side where the blue car is, and to the water sports building currently. So the tarmacked area that you see in this slide is predominantly going to be occupied by the new climbing wall building. Next slide, please. And here's some other photographs of the main part of the site that's going to have the building upon it. Next slide. And again, you've got the lake on your right-hand side, and you've got the car parking area on the right-hand side, just to the rear of the trees in the foreground. And you can just about make out the water sports centre in the background. Next slide, please. And next slide. Okay, so as part of the application process, a series of sort of assessments have been made in terms to assess the landscape impact of the development proposal. And what they've done in the following slides is identify the location of the building as it would stand in the landscape, and have put a red edge around the building so that you can see whether or not it would be viewable from where the photograph was taken or not. So this particular photograph is taken from Ham Lane, and what you've got in the grassed area to the sort of between the sort of last tree in the foreground and the blue star is the existing overflow car parking area. And just below the blue star, you can just about make out the red edge of the climbing wall building, and that shows the extent of the tower that you would be able to see from this section of Ham Lane. Next slide, please. So these photographs are taken from the sort of north bank of of the lake looking towards the water sports centre, and you can see what the building would appear like from these particular viewpoints. Obviously, it's a substantial sized building, and it will be obvious within these short range views. My opinion, and shared by the landscape consultant that was sort of shared, that was employed and engaged by the City Council to help us consider this particular application, was that yes, this building will be very obvious within these sort of short views. However, overall, the impact of the building would be only moderate adverse. Next slide, please. So these are photographs, again, on the sort of north bank of the lake, but sort of set further back. You can see the appearance of the building. So in both cases, what you'll have is a treed background to the main horizontal section of the building, with only the sort of upper section of the spire of the climbing tower visible above the tree line. Next slide, please. Again, north bank, much further out. Again, you've got the building sits against a backdrop of tree planting, and in the top photograph, as you can see, it's only the top section of the spire which would be visible above that backdrop, and in the bottom photograph, it would only be the very top section that would sort of penetrate the skyline. Next slide, please. These are a little bit more challenging to spot, and in both cases, so these are taken from, well, the bottom of the photographs are taken from Neem Parkway, and in both cases, the building doesn't penetrate the skyline. It sits below the tree line, and so wouldn't be visible from either location. Next slide, please. Apologies, these slides slightly out of order. So again, this is on the north bank, and you'll see whether just below the blue star, only the very tip top of the spire of the building would penetrate the skyline in this particular view, at this particular viewpoint. Next slide, please. And again, we've got a couple of photos again showing a similar thing, with the very top of the building only just penetrating the skyline from these two locations. Next slide, please. Part of this development does sit within the boundaries of a scheduled ancient monument. The extent of the scheduled ancient monument is edged in blue, and as you can see, there has been a considerable amount of development that's taken place in the past within the confines of the scheduled ancient monument, and that includes residential development to the south, just north of the railway. You've got the caravan and camping facility, plus the roads that constructed and lead down to the water sports centre and the proposed application site. So the building itself that's proposed sits outside of the scheduled ancient monument, and only the car park sits within. And as you'll have seen from your report, we have consulted with Historic England and our own archaeologist on this particular proposal, and both are satisfied that adequate mitigation can be provided for in the development of this scheme. So in the case of the car parking area, that's going to be a strip and record of any findings that are made. That's particular part of the proposal is also subject to the scheduled ancient monument regime. And in terms of the building of the climbing wall itself, That particular site has been subject to some archaeological excavation previously, and we're satisfied that it can be constructed through the use of conditions in a way which is respectful to the archaeology that may arise on that site. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this slide shows where the above ground heritage features are located in relation to the application site. So I'm sorry, it says sort of click to add. So where you've got the word click, that is where the application site is, and you'll see blobs of red, and that relates to listed buildings, and you've got brown relates to conservation areas. The green is parks and gardens, historic parks and gardens. So you've got a number of above ground heritage assets in the locality, and we've assessed the application in relation to what impact this development proposal would have on their setting. And we have concluded that the impact at worst would not be significant, and the significance of that harm is outweighed by the benefits that this development proposal would bring. There's no next slide, so forgive me. So what we've done in relation to this development proposal is consider it against the relevant national and local planning policy and guidance and any other material planning considerations. And that has included, and this isn't an extensive list, this is the main matters. So first of all, we've looked at the relevant policies specific to Neen Park. We've looked at the sequential test in terms of the location of recreational facilities, because our policies say that we should be looking to locate these leisure schemes with a city centre first or district centre second type approach. And what the applicant has done is identify possible locations using this sequential test approach where this scheme could potentially be located. And those locations are all identified in your report, and in that report it goes on to identify why these alternatives have proven not to be capable of accommodating this particular development proposal. In a similar fashion, because the site is at flood risk, we have to go through a sequential test to see whether or not there are any alternative locations where this could be located that are at lesser flood risk. And that process has been gone through and is summarised within your committee report. And it's been concluded that there are no suitable alternative sites at lesser flood risk that this site could be located on. We've had regard to the landscape impacts, as I've outlined earlier in my presentation. And yes, certainly we will be putting a significant sized building within this location, and in the immediate vicinity would be a very obvious structure, but that doesn't necessarily make it wrong and inappropriate to do so. What we've identified is that the harm would only be moderately adverse, and we are satisfied that given the benefits of this scheme, that adverse impact is acceptable. We've also looked at the ecological impact that this development would have, and that primarily relates to the impact that this scheme may have on bats. Bats are known to sort of reside in the locality and also use this area for commuting and for foraging. But our ecologists, having consulted them, they're satisfied that this proposal with a low level of lighting of the building which is proposed and the car parking area that's proposed, plus the other mitigating factors are such that this development proposal is satisfactory in terms of its impact on bats. We've also looked at the impact on trees. Yes, some trees will be lost, and you can see from your report that the tree officer raises no objection. And what we will be getting to compensate for those losses is significant gains in new tree plantings. So that's over 70 trees to replace the loss of some 15 trees on site, plus new hedgerow and shrub planting is included within a proposed landscaping plan. I've also touched on archaeology and above ground heritage. We're satisfied that there's no significant harm being caused to the setting of those important assets, and that limited harm that does arise is offset by the benefits of the scheme. And then turning finally to the issue of transportation, you'll see from your report that the only area of concern to the highways team is in relation to the PM peak hour, and that relates to when competitions might be run. And by way of mitigation, it is going to be agreed that competitions would avoid that peak period, and therefore that impact would be satisfactorily mitigated. So that concludes my presentation, Chairman. As is usual, I'm happy to take questions once the sort of speakers have had their opportunity to address committee and members have had the opportunity to put questions to them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harding. Okay, we have 12 people registered to speak. Can I first ask the ward councillor, please, Councillor Dave, when you're ready, if you please would address committee, just to let you know you have 10 minutes, and the Democratic Service Officer will let you know when you have 30 seconds left. When you're ready, please unmute your mic and begin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Howell and I are two of Alton Waterville Ward's councillors, and we would like to speak in support of the community that we have been elected to represent. Ferry Meadows holds a special place in the heart of local residents, many of whom have lived here since it was created and who feel a personal connection to it and a deep sense of responsibility for its future. This application has frightened some of these people. It isn't that they are against progress. They understand that Peterborough is a growing city and that all things cannot remain the same. But they believe that Ferry Meadows would be a corner of the city that would be preserved as a quiet haven for people and wildlife forever. This is why the height of the building, at its position next to Gunwade Lake, has given so many people cause for concern. This isn't a barely noticeable incremental change to the park. The visual impact will be huge. While aesthetics can be a matter of personal taste, our main concern about this development is its impact on the city's goal to be carbon neutral. After all, this is a city where a climate emergency has been declared. Many residents of our ward have a perfectly understandable fear that this development is a step in the wrong direction. They would like the centre to be built in another location and for Ferry Meadows to remain as it is. However, we also understand that Ferry Meadows was created to provide recreation and that many people across the city who don't necessarily have the same regard for Ferry Meadows as local residents do are excited at the prospect of the opportunities the new centre will bring. But as so many people who have objected have stated, this is the right building, but it's the wrong place. That was really repeated in the objections: right building, wrong place. As Green councillors who look at the bigger picture and the longer term, we have serious concerns about the impact of this facility in this location on local transport networks. Oundle Road is already congested during the school run and on hot summer days. The air polluting traffic leading into Ferry Meadows can be very heavy, so much so that Neem Park Trust sometimes decides to close its car parks, leading to additional and often antisocial parking on local residential streets. Won't this development make this problem worse? To be in keeping with the city's goals to become carbon neutral, isn't it time to bar petrol and diesel dependent traffic from Ferry Meadows altogether? During earlier lockdowns, people were told they could only visit Ferry Meadows on foot or by bicycle, and many remarked to us how much more pleasant they found their visit to the park when there were no cars there. With the exception of access for disabled people and essential maintenance traffic, shouldn't Ferry Meadows now be a place where other types of vehicle are not allowed? Oak Meadows is already being used as a temporary overflow car park and will be extended with this development. What was once an unsport view of the park when approaching by the railway bridge is already peppered with vehicles. The access road leading round to Gunwade Lake is fairly quiet, but Alton Wistow residents who walk to Ferry Meadows are understandably concerned that this could become busier given this development. If this is the start of a trend to draw motorised traffic deeper into the park, then the character of Ferry Meadows will change. And for many people that we represent, this is simply unacceptable. There is currently no bus service to Ferry Meadows, which is doubtless why so many people drive to get to it. In fact, the closest bus service is very infrequent, poorly advertised, and a considerable distance from the park. An electric bus service to serve the park seems long overdue. Peterborough has a transport hierarchy that puts the pedestrian at the top, but this application fails to do that. And as such, it is out of keeping with the city's goals to encourage people away from the car as their transportation of choice. And now we come to the issue of parking. Already, and since Neem Park Trust began charging for car parking, parking on our residential streets by visitors to Ferry Meadows, who openly admit they want to avoid Neem Park Trust's charges, is causing distress and congestion, with the council having to introduce new traffic orders to deter antisocial parking. As the popularity of Ferry Meadows grows, with or without this activity centre, it is very clear that a new travel infrastructure that is mindful of both the transport hierarchy and the climate emergency should be put in place. Our local residents are right to fear that this application will attract more motorised vehicles into the area. They fear that the air around Ferry Meadows and our local community will suffer, and with it the health of our local people and our local wildlife. It isn't enough to say it will make no difference. We need to know how it will make a positive difference at a time when positive action in the face of the climate emergency is urgently needed. The Council's Planning Department has recommended that this application is approved today, but we would ask the committee to please consider very carefully the concerns of those very many people who have objected to it, and to contemplate the impact that the additional road traffic will have on both the park and the surrounding areas, given the city's environmental ambitions. We support the creation of this activity centre in Peterborough, but on balance, we feel we cannot support Neem Park Trust's plans as they have been set out before you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Day. Committee, do you have any questions, please, for Councillor Day? Councillor Hogg.
Yes, I mean, so you alluded to the fact that local residents are against this proposal, and there are obviously large numbers that have put in applications in terms of their views. It's my experience that people that are against something are far more motivated to talk about their views than people that are for something. What is your feeling as the local ward councillor? Have you talked to local residents, and have you had any positive responses about this application?
Yes, well, we've received lots of letters, lots of emails. Most of them are objections. I've also taken the time to read through as many of the objections on the portal as possible, most of them from local residents. There are a handful of local residents that tend to live further away from the park. Those living on, say, for example, Northgate or in Goldhay, a handful of residents are more supportive. But certainly the overwhelming number of residents that live closer to the park, and as we know, Ferry Meadows is very much part of some of our residential areas. You know, we have Cherryfields that's very close. Well, it actually comes off Ham Lane. We have the Rookery and other areas of Wistow that back onto the park. And the overwhelming response from those members from Wistow and from Waterville are that they object particularly to the height, to the increased parking, the impacts on wildlife, and the impacts on the parking around residential streets. So yes, there are people that are in support that are local, but the overwhelming majority that live closer to the park are objecting.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions? No. Thank you, Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, can I now invite Simon Martin to address committee? Simon, you'll have 5 minutes in which to address the committee. When you're ready, please unmute your mic and begin. Is Simon there?
Yes, Chair, he's in the meeting.
Simon, can you hear him? You're on mute, Simon, like me, I was earlier. No, still on mute, Simon. There, you're in. Simon, you should be all right now. Try now. No.
Try now? Okay.
Yes.
Hear me?
Hello, Simon. Welcome. You have 5 minutes when you're ready, please.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Chairman and other visitors, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak at this meeting. First of all, I find it deeply cynical that the committee has already made its intentions clear to support this project on a Facebook post on the Neame Park Trust site over a week ago. So this event feels like a bit of a sham, not a real meeting where you will consider the views of your local voting constituents. So far, the views and objections of 6,000 plus local individuals have fallen on deaf ears. Some early market research is used to justify this project. The results were from circa 250 individuals. I wonder how many were climbers. Most concerns centre on the location for this project. In January 2020, even UK Climbing featured an article that stated a more appropriate location ought to be arranged. Can I remind councillors of the council's own conflict of interest policies? Have they assured themselves that no one connected with the project has any vested interest by way of memberships or associations in it proceeding? From simple research, I can find an individual who's a director of the British Mountaineering Council, who is also the chair of the Peterborough Town Funding Council, and is also the chief executive of Neame Park Trust. Is this a conflict of interests? Mr. Chairman, has this been referred to the Council's Audit Committee for review? The forecast increase in visitor numbers varies from 75,000 to 250,000 per annum. We've just heard during this presentation that it's around 100,000. So that equates to something like 270 visitors every single day. Do you really believe that will happen? How can the published figures be so vague? Also, how will these visitors' numbers be achieved? Who are these potential visitors? And given the socio-economic makeup of Peterborough, won't this be far beyond the financial means of many locals? Should this business fail or require bailout from the council, as many other climbing facilities across the UK have, who will be responsible for the cost of supporting it or removing this facility and restoring the area? How does this development and the additional carbon emissions that it will generate fit with the council's so-called green credentials? Surely it has the opposite impact, but this seems to be being ignored. Already the nearby streets and laybys are full of visitors' cars who are avoiding the parking charges. I've seen little consideration as to improving the infrastructure to ensure the roads and access points do not become overwhelmed, causing further traffic congestion and pollution in the area. Whilst I appreciate without Neame Park Trust's funding, Peterborough would not have a climbing wall, the reality is that such a substantial structure will have a devastating impact on the only natural green space in the city. The peace will be shattered, the beautiful vistas blighted, the destruction of mature parkland and meadow. It will be irreversible. And this risk could all be for nothing, as if, as I suspect, it proves to be an unviable business. A project of this type should only be considered for a brownfield site, with established robust infrastructure and transport links. And if the funding for this is not forthcoming from any other one than NPT, then maybe there's a reason. This is a vanity project, a white elephant built on a very weak business case that you can drive a bus through. I implore you to delay. Ask the audit committee to review a potential conflict of interest and reconsider the views of your constituents. Let your legacy be that you save the park from a massive environmental and financial error. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Okay, committee, do you have any questions, please? Councillor Rush.
Yes, Chair. Mr. Martin has just made an accusation that this committee has already made a decision on this application. No members on this committee are able to make a predetermined decision. If they have, we are not allowed to be on this committee. Could the lawyer please answer his accusations, please?
Yes, Stephen, I think that's quite important, actually, that there's an accusation made there, but no actual evidence of who and when. So would you like to add something there, please, Stephen, as a legal officer?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I suspect Mr. Martin is conflating the identity of the applicant with the planning committee. It is the planning committee which makes the decision, and of course there is no suggestion that there is a conflict of interest within the planning committee. Whether the applicant's chief executive has a conflict, in inverted commas, or not, is neither here nor there in terms of the planning merits of this decision. As far as I'm aware, and I advise the planning committee on its lawful activity, there is no conflict of interest. There is no suggestion that the planning committee has made any sort of announcement on any website as to its view before today, and indeed it is not lawful for it to do so. So far as I'm aware, there is no conflict of interest, there is no predetermination. If there was, I'd be very concerned, but I'm not aware of any, and I'd be very surprised if there was.
So may I reply, Mr. Chairman?
No, I'm afraid not, I'm afraid. Can you turn your mic off, please? We're in, it wasn't a question to you, but okay, go on, go for it. You've made the accusation, then you need to come forward and tell me and tell committee, please, why the committee, now you have to turn your mic off. Could you please tell me and tell everybody in this room why you think a member of this committee or the committee have made that decision?
There was a post that was on Neen Park,
from who?
Which said that the committee was supportive of the application, and that's the one I'm referring to.
Okay, so that was Neen Park made that comment.
They did indeed, yes.
Okay, fine, that's fair.
So if you believe that that is an allegation that is unfair and that this committee did not in any way collude, then I take back my comment. However, the comment regarding material planning consideration, I am very curious to understand how someone can be a director of the British Mountaineering Council, can also be the chair of the Peterborough Town Council, and can also be the chief executive of Neen Park Trust, where one is providing funding of £25 million and the other is benefiting from £1.5 million of that spend.
I totally understand your question. Mr. Harding's going to explain the answer to you rather than me do it. Mr. Harding?
Thank you, Chairman. I can't be 100% sure, but I believe that the post that's being referred to on the Facebook page of Neen Park is one dated of the 16th of March, and it says, "We're excited that Peterborough City Council planning officers have recommended that our plans for the new climbing facility, etc., are approved by the planning committee on Tuesday, 23rd of March." So for making a point of clarification, planning officers are duty bound to have to make a recommendation on any planning application that comes before the planning committee for determination. So every committee report you see from us will always say we recommend approval or refusal. We have to do that. Committee are perfectly right in being able to not agree with the officers, and they can go against our recommendation, be it for refusal or approval. The final thing to say, Chairman, is that in relation to the Chief Executive of Neem Park Trust, yes, he might well have activities going on elsewhere outside of the Trust's activities, but when it comes to the determination of this application, we're dealing with the application and not anything else that may sit in the background. As I'm aware, to the best of my knowledge, at every Towns Fund meeting, the Chief Executive of Neem Park Trust has always identified and declared his interest and not participated in any parts of the meeting that may relate to this particular planning application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hyde. I think we've cleared up then probably where that comment came from, so which I'm pleased about, because obviously the neutrality of committee is extremely important. It's a cross-party group and it's being called on to make a decision, and it certainly shouldn't have made any decisions before we've heard all the evidence and all the speakers, which is what we're here for. So hopefully, I hope, Simon, that's put your mind at rest that committee have no particular predetermination for this today. Okay, Mr. Turnock then, David Turnock. Hello, David. When you're ready, 5 minutes to address committee.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, councillors. I'm chairman of the Civic Society, so I'm speaking to you today with our comments. Your committee is faced with a very difficult decision today, just as indeed the Civic Society has had, in order to balance the benefits to the city of an addition to leisure facilities against the harm done to a much loved and visited public park. A long and very comprehensive report, for which the planning officers should be commended, is before you, and in this is a veritable encyclopedia of information set out under numerous subject headings from location to wildlife. In almost every one of the dozen or so categories, the officer's assessment is that, although some degree of harm would result from the proposal, that harm is outweighed by the benefits to be had from the proposed lakeside activity centre. The essential issue we feel in consideration of this application is an appreciation of the true character and purpose of Ferry Meadows. Does this part of Neem Park have an urban or a rural feel to it? We believe that the vast majority of the thousands of visitors to Ferry Meadows come to relax in this rural environment away from their everyday cares, to find calm in a countryside location with a small range of amenities, providing simple comforts. And they come to enjoy proximity to nature, wide open spaces, bird song, big skies, ancient trees, wildlife, the lakes and the river. And the COVID pandemic and its lockdown have demonstrated how valuable Ferry Meadows is in helping to maintain our health and balance in life. And it has never seen so many walkers and cyclists enjoying their daily bout of exercise and recuperation. So our main issue is whether this facility is in the right place. This is a sequential test that is being carried out, reviews all the city sites which are plainly acceptable or unacceptable for such a tall structure, and those in the city centre plainly are not. But there does not seem to have been much consideration given to peripheral sites around the city. If you consider the location of the existing sports facilities, such as the ice rink, Peterborough Town Sports Club on Bretton Gate, or both of the rugby clubs, they are all located on or very close to a very good road network. None of them are located at the end of a very long cul-de-sac accessed through a primarily residential area, such as this Ferry Meadows location. Your officer's report notes that this facility might lead to over another 100,000 visits to Ferry Meadows per year, and that is over 2,000 journeys per week, and a large number of those will come by car along Ham Lane. So the Civic Society has reviewed the impact that this proposal will have on wildlife, and much as we think this building design could be iconic and certainly put Peter on the map as a national sports venue, the proposed activity centre, by virtue of its appearance, overbearing size, attendant car park encroachment and increased traffic, is not compatible with the existing ambience and atmosphere of the park. It will damage something which is working so well and has been doing so for more than 40 years. In summary, this application should be refused. It is potentially a good building, but it is in the wrong place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turnock. Members, do you have any questions, please? No, see no hands. Thank you, Mr. Turnock, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, could I now call on Michael Samways, please? Michael Samways, welcome to the meeting. Good afternoon to you. Could you have 5 minutes already to address committee?
Thank you, Chairman. Hope you can hear me okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today. By way of introduction, my name is Michael Samways. I have over 20 years professional experience in planning and environmental management. I've worked for both national and local government, as well as the Environment Agency, and a variety of other organisations. I speak to you today as a candidate in the upcoming Waterville ward elections, where I've spent a lot of time since the application was submitted, along with Councillor Aitken, talking to residents in the ward. And whilst it's clear there are strong divided opinions, which I think has already been referred to, across the board on this application, I have to tell you the overwhelming majority of the many residents who have contacted me are firmly against this proposal. As neighbours and regular users, and some of which are daily users of the park, it's essential that their voice and their views are heard, because after all, they're the ones that will be most affected by this scheme. The first point I'd like to make is that the objections are genuine. They're real concerns made by people who really value Ferry Meadows and are invested in its future. They're not NIMBYs, and there's certainly not a few lone voices, and this is clear from the large number of the objections that the Planning Authority has received. The second point, and from my experience, it's unusual actually for a planning application, is that those who have spoken to me and are objecting are not dominated by a particular age group or any other defining social factor. And we've got primary school children, such as my own kids, through to families and older people, all who raise valid concerns. I think if you look at some of the objections, there are even some letters submitted from students at St John's School in Alton Goldhay that are of particular interest. Over 450 objections submitted, and a large number of those are from right here in Alton Waterville, and I ask members of the Planning Committee to ensure that the views of local residents are given due consideration in determining this application. The next point I would like to raise relates to the application of the sequential test and the consideration of alternative sites. Some very valid points are made there by Mr. Tornick from the Civic Society. I think the planning consultants have had a number of attempts to revise this document and have still not been able to submit a convincing assessment of alternatives. The cut and paste conclusions that every site is neither sequentially preferable nor commercially viable really is unconvincing. There are a number of sites that are sequentially the same as Lakeside, such as the showground, commercial allocations around Thorpe Wood, land near to the rowing course, or even land in the Trust's rural estate that's assigned for activity in their own master plan. Any and others, when considered on their own merits, would surely have less environmental impact, lower risk of flooding, better access to sustainable transport, and a variety of other measures. And on the question of viability, there are a number of different commercial and investment models that the Trust could consider, including partnerships that could make this scheme developable elsewhere. The final point I'd like to make is about the loss of amenity value. It's not been mentioned in any of the other objections, but I think it's really important that it's considered. And this site is the only part of the country park where visitors can get views of the lake from their cars or get easy access to the shore. Now, from the users that we've spoken to in the ward, and this is primarily those with mobility problems, so disabled people and their carers, the elderly, and those living with dementia. And public consultation speak would refer to these people as hard to reach, and they don't typically engage in public consultations of this type. But these are the visitors. Now, these visitors may not have the same revenue potential as those who would visit the climbing wall. I'm absolutely determined and resolute that the trust should be meeting the needs of these users. Indeed, I believe it should be doing more, not taking away what they've already got. Now, in summary, the pandemic has shown just how important access to green and blue space is to residents of Alton Waterville and Peterborough as a whole. This is particularly important for health and well-being. Now, at a time when much of the park facilities have been closed, visitor numbers have remained high throughout. Now, I understand the need for Neem Park Trust to generate revenue to reinvest, but they've got it wrong on this one. An indoor facility, effectively a windowless tower in the heart of our country park, this could and should go anywhere else and should be refused by the planning committee today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samways. Members, do you have any questions, please? Councillor Coles.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Samways, thank you very much for your objections. I'm quite interested in what you say about disability access, and I'm just wondering, you briefly mentioned those groups that had mentioned issues to you. I wonder, could you just be a bit more in depth about who you've been able to speak to and what the particular issues are? Because having looked at the plans, that there is some sort of access through. I just wondered why it was a particular concern.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Coles, for your question. I think the main point is the actual parking adjacent to the shorefront. Now, if you go there any time of the year throughout the winter, there's often users that pull up and use that sort of shorefront parking to look out at the open views across the lake. And indeed, I think it's mentioned, or I know it's mentioned in a number of the objections that have been made that this shorefront parking is used by carers of sailability sailors, so they can watch their people use sailability out on the water, particularly in inclement weather. So it's really important for them. And I think whilst there's access going to be maintained to the shorefront and that people will get there, it's not the same as there already. And I think it's really important that we try to maintain that shore access to people, particularly with mobility problems, as I've said.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions, that's okay. My first is you cited that you are a relative expert in the environmental agency and environmental impact. Could you elaborate from your kind of expert opinion more on the environmental impact that you think this site could have? That's okay.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Well, as you've seen, Councillor Bond, there was a screening opinion done to see if this proposal fell within the remit of the environmental impact assessment regulations. It was determined that it wasn't. A number of the environmental impacts have been looked at as sort of standalone issues. So there've been a variety of ecology reports, so baseline studies and impact assessments submitted, and they've covered all sorts of issues. And the predominant one was referred to in the initial presentation is around bats. So the use of the site for foraging, particularly for bats, and one of the impacts that has been identified, and I think will be spoken about later, is the impact on light pollution on foraging bats, and I think that's an important issue that should be picked up. Councillor Day also talked about the impact on carbon emissions and the aspirations for carbon zero and reducing carbon emissions that this application will have a serious impact on. And I think also landscape and visual. And whilst Nick Harding gave a good presentation on the landscape and visual impact and assessment, I think the fact remains this will be visible predominantly from a wide variety of viewpoints around Neem Park and surrounding the valley.
Brilliant, thank you. And my next question, are you a local resident by any chance of the surrounding areas of Ferry Meadows?
I am, yes, I am, Councillor Bond. I go to Ferry Meadows 2 or 3 times a week. In fact, I was there not more than an hour before the meeting having my lunchtime run. So yes, I'm a regular visitor to Ferry Meadows.
Brilliant. So it's been touched upon about the parking issues on the street and stuff. what would be your kind of view on it? Would you see it as a major problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's already a problem. It's already a problem, and Councillor Day referred to it previously. The parking charges have brought about an increase in parking on side streets. So if you look at Cherry Fields as well as some of the lay-bys on Oundle Road, it does, particularly during the good weather in the summer months, it causes a problem, and that's only going to be exacerbated by citing this wall here. I think somewhere where there's access to better bus routes and more sustainable means of travel, including direct links to the station, because let's face it, this centre will bring in visitors from regional and sub-regional areas as well, and the more that they can be encouraged to use sustainable transport, obviously the better for this scheme. So we don't want to be sort of having development that encourages off-street parking in the local area.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hogg.
Yeah, you alluded to the fact that you'd reached out to the local community, and I just wondered what methods you'd used to do so.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hogg. So as you'll appreciate, I've been working very closely with Councillor Aitken in the ward. So we've been talking to residents via social media and through online consultation. We've also been speaking to residents through feedback from newsletters that we've been issuing in the ward to sort of understand and get people's views. A variety of methods is the answer, Councillor Hogg.
Okay, so I just to kind of press you further on that, as you alluded to the fact that that there's a fairly aged population in Worcester, being quite a mature estate, and social media is not necessarily the best way of contacting such residents. I just for kind of clarification, I live on an estate that abuts to Ferry Meadows, and I wasn't aware of. I think we've had one leaflet from the Conservatives, but with a small article. So I'm not entirely sure that maybe that the methods that you've used to gain local opinion is one that holds up.
Was
that a question, Chairman?
Yeah, we're going to ask that question. It's not really your opinion that matters, Councillor. Is that a question?
Well, so the question is essentially, if you're saying that you've only done social media, I'm trying to work out if you still feel that that's an appropriate way of contacting residents to get their opinions, or are you just basically getting the opinions of people that are particularly riled up because they are against it? As I said, I asked the same question to Councillor Day. It's not a political question. People that are riled up are more likely to have an opinion, whereas people that are quite comfortable with a new development will generally not make any representations.
So I think the question is, Chairman, are we relying just on feedback via social media? The answer to that is no. We've engaged with residents through a variety of means, including social media, but also via email and out and about in the ward, where we've been able to with COVID restrictions. But also, this application has been submitted now since 2019, so pre-pandemic. We also spent a lot of time talking to residents when we were able to. But as I've alluded to, I use Ferry Meadows 2 to 3 times a week, Councillor Hogg, so I speak to people when I'm out and about as well.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, please, Mr. Samways? No, thank you very much. Okay, could I now invite Lawrence Dobney to address committee? Are you there, Lawrence?
Hopefully, yes.
Good afternoon, Lawrence. You'll have 5 minutes when you're ready to address committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. And firstly, thank you for letting me speak today. I am a regular user of the country park and also donate to the park. So whether that's a vested interest is debatable. But basically, I just thoroughly enjoy the unspoilt views and ever-changing natural habitat of the particular park. I've visited numerous country parks around the country, and Ferry Meadows must be within the best there is in the country. And the council and Neem Park should be thanked for doing all of that. So, if you like, you've achieved a lot in the last 40 years. Ferry Meadows is basically to enjoy outdoor pursuits. There are endless meadows, lakes, woodlands, and if you like, the pursuits around there are walking, cycling, sailing, fishing, all of which are outdoor pursuits. And I think within the last 12 months, it's become even more important that people are able to actually get out and enjoy the open countryside. Neem Park Trust is always developing the park. They've put new wildlife hides in, they've done the boardwalk around Bluebell Woods. It is constantly changing, but everything that they do is basically for the outdoor lifestyle. This building at 34 metres tall would be an eyesore to the local community. It is within probably a quarter of a mile of a residential area, Orton Wistow. No other structure at this height will be permitted within a quarter of a mile of any residential area. Why should the climbing tower be any different? We've also spoken earlier about the increased traffic down Ham Lane. It is a very narrow lane. If you're going to get 100,000 visitors, additional visitors there, that's, if you like, 2,000 a week. That is a lot of traffic to go down Ham Lane. When building the site, you'll be having heavy lorries, basically kind of a lot of hard work. Always not concerned that children on their bikes may be injured. We wouldn't want to have that on our conscience. It's been mentioned that Peterborough has not necessarily got the highest social, if you like, society. It is often deemed to be one of the worst places in the country to live. Not that I know why that is, but Ferry Meadows is an outdoor pursuit that families can use for free. There's no cost to going there. If we put in a climbing frame, there will be pressure on parents that are hard up by their children. Can I go to? Can I go to? This is not going to be helping their particular financial needs. Also, we do have an obesity crisis. Allowing people to walk free in Ferry Meadows is certainly helping that. And as is so often been said, the climbing frame, climbing tower is probably a good idea. It is in the wrong location. I am a Speedway supporter that is at the showground. Housing has gone on around the showground for a number of years, but if it was now and somebody said, can we put a Speedway stadium on the showground, I'm sure the planning department would say no. And the noise from the Speedway is probably for 50 hours a year, considerably different to what may be happening in the climbing tower. And also, if the climbing tower is not a success, who actually pays to keep it going and the removal of it? My final comment would be, please don't let commercialism spoil an area of outstanding natural beauty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dobney. Members have any questions at all? No, I don't see any hands. Thank you very much, Mr. Dobney.
Thank you.
Can I now invite Andrea Lindley, please? You're on mute, Andrea, I'm afraid. There, you're on now.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, hello, Andrea. Welcome. You have 5 minutes when you're ready to address committee.
Thank you. I well remember back in 2019, standing outside the planning officer's office delivering a petition with fellow residents with over 1,100 signatures of objection to the Trust's plan of Ferry Meadows Country Park. Signatures from residents living across the city as well as those of visitors and local residents. I think that's important to note because very often it's referred to as a local issue. It clearly wasn't. Ferry Meadows Country Park is first and foremost a recognised country park gifted to the people of Peterborough by the Development Corporation, as has been said, and Neame Park Trust to manage and care for the park on behalf of residents and visitors. The landowners of Neame Park are in fact Peterborough City Council. It's well-known country park, both locally and nationally, and was recently awarded the prestigious Green Flag Award 2019, attracting nearly 2 million visitors. So I think we can say that Ferry Meadows as a country park is well and truly on the map. Country parks, as you know from the local plan, are to provide for children's play areas, informal recreational pursuits, running, walking, sitting out, nature trails, etc. Sounds like a country park that you know, certainly sounds like Ferry Meadows. Excepting, of course, in the Peterborough local plan of 2019, where country parks were covered, policy 25, which seeks to minimise developments contrary to the purpose and pursuits of country parks. For some reason, Ferry Meadows was omitted. Nevertheless, I object to the development on the basis that it is a country park. The council, whilst considering that there is still scope for further recreational development in the Neame Valley area of Peterborough, clearly stated that those developments should have due regard to the natural environment. In local policy plan 24, Peterborough City Council laid emphasis on the development involving low-key, informal recreational activities in the rural areas of the Neame Valley, moving, it has to be said, to more formal recreational activities in the urban section. But local plan section 24 did not seek to explain, clarify or determine where or how this gradual transition from informal dispersed activities to the more formal and organised activities in the more urban areas was to take place. So I think this is about degrees of interpretation of proposed recreational activities. Ferry Meadows is a country park which gives Peterborough residents and visitors the opportunity to access and experience green open spaces and wildlife and nature in a rural landscape. And obviously, near the Neame Valley is a rural area. I would therefore object to the development as not appropriate for the siting within a country park. The mechanisms of development were passed to the Neame Park Trust, which is a non-statutory body. It does make reference to its master plan 2017, but these are vague references to low-key developments in Ferry Meadows Country Park. And what we have, as we can see, is something much huger and of an international basis. Ferry Meadows lies within the Neame Valley, and as such, development should be included for consideration in accordance to section 27 of the local plan, landscape character area. The proposal for this large-scale building and car park neither, in my opinion, conserves or enhances the landscape. It's an urban building, as has been said, in a rural country park. And although references have been made to it, to the adjacent building, the water sports centre, I think insufficient consideration has been given.
30 seconds left.
Cumulative. Thank you. So on that basis, I would also like to say objections submitted to Peterborough City Council plan come from near and far, visitors and residents of Peterborough, and also from further afield. Often passionate, nothing wrong with a bit of passion about this development not taking place on Ferry Meadows. It's a citywide resource, and residents from all parts of Peterborough have raised their objections. Given this high level of public...
5 minutes.
Sorry, given this, I beg your pardon, am I out of time?
Finish your sentence then, please. Just finish the sentence.
Yes, final sentence, sorry, Chair. Given this high level of public opposition, how will approving this planning application be seen to best represent the interests of the people of Peterborough and surrounding areas and countrywide visitors? Thank you very much for your tolerance.
Thank you very much. Members, you have questions, please? Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. You say this is a rural area for families to go down and experience. Have you ever objected in the past to activities going on within the park, such as the firework bonanza, the kite flying, and other activities that have been going on that attracts many people?
No, I haven't, Councillor.
Thank you very much.
This is a much more significant thing we're actually talking about. They were events, and this is a proposal for a bigger, more permanent development. Thank you.
It's just that when I talk about the fireworks extravaganza, whatever it was called, we're talking about a lot about wildlife and birds, and with that amount of bangs going off in the evening, I wouldn't have thought that would have been appropriate in that sort of area. So I'm very surprised that you have never ever objected to that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Next one, Councillor Hogg.
Yes, thank you very much for your submission, Andrea. As the last person on the list of objectors, that maybe some of my questions might be it's directed to kind of maybe all the people that have
gotten before you.
Sorry, I will try and be succinct. Yeah. So what I'm understanding from people is that the park is a much loved asset, and that they are broadly, apart from this decision by Neame Park Trust to expand in this way, broadly very pleased with the stewardship of Neame Park Trust in terms of the enhancements that they've made, the investment they've made in bringing the park to where we find it today. Is that broadly in line with your thoughts?
It certainly is, Councillor, yes. Looking around, I mean, clearly there are certain aspects that can be improved upon, but given this past year, I think more than ever people have had an appreciation of what Neame Park Trust is offering and has been able to offer us. After all, I would regard it as my public park because it was gifted to the people of Peterborough. It isn't just it isn't a private country park. It's for everyone to enjoy what a country park has to offer.
Okay, and my second question, which hopefully is going to be a bit briefer, is that on the one hand, no, my question, not your answer.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah. My second question is basically it's a bit of a Schrodinger's question, really, in the fact that on the one hand, people are saying that this is a fool's errand and it's a commercial exercise that is not going to work and people will not come, and yet at the same time it's also going to be a roving success, and the roads around Ferry Meadows are going to be snarled up with traffic eager to get to this climbing wall. And I'm just trying to work out what's going to be the reality. What do you feel the reality is going to be? Is this going to be a success, and so therefore you're going to be saying that there's going to be lots of traffic, or are you saying that it's not going to be a success and the city is going to have to bail it out? But it can't be both.
Well, I think it possibly can, because I think it could have an immediate draw to it, and we will see the influx of visitors and traffic, and we've heard the numbers that have been involved. And then the experience of Raphoe in Edinburgh, which is actually more of a comparable climbing wall than the Milton Keynes one, is that after a certain amount of time, well, my understanding is that it went into liquidation and the council there had to pick up the pieces. So I think there will be times when we experience huge amounts of influx of visitors as well as traffic. But at the same time, over perhaps a longer period, as with Raphoe, it might cease to be financially viable, and then somebody has to pick up the tab.
Councillor Brown, please.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask, the petitioners that, are they from the local area of Peterborough, or are they from far afield that have petitioned against this venture?
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Brown. The petition that we collected all the signatures for in 2019, it was early 2019, we had a fortnight. We were given a fortnight by the planning department to collect these signatures in opposition. We stood at the local shopping centres in Orton, and we also went down to Ferry Meadows. And a lot of the time was spent in explaining to people just exactly what the proposal was. There seemed to be no information or lack of understanding of what it entailed. So we spent a lot of our time talking to people about what the proposal was. So that was the 1100 petition. But obviously people from different parts of Peterborough and visitors come to the various shopping centres. So there were a good raft of local residents that signed the petition, but also, and I think significantly, they were also from across city. So I think that is important also to note, that, you know, not just local residents, but citywide residents and visitors. We spoke to a lot of visitors from different parts of the country down at Ferry Meadows, who in some instances were quite horrified. They'd come to stay at the camping and caravanning club just up the road. And the reason that they came to Ferry Meadows was for the open green space, the parkland, the countryside around it. And they were frankly horrified to think that this was all going to be bespoiled.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chairman. And I have a few questions, if you'll indulge me. My first would be coming back to Councillor, I believe it was Rush's question. So you haven't objected to things in the past, say the fireworks bonanza, etc. Could you elaborate why you think this scheme would be different from, say, that, for example?
Okay. My understanding of those were that they were one-off events or infrequent events. So, you know, they happened, and I understand now that there are no fireworks planned for Ferry Meadows. We have running events down here, and we have various other day events, but we're talking about something very different here. This is for something permanent. And I don't know the lifespan of this, expectant lifespan of this proposal, of this development, but I should think it's certainly longer than a day, a year, or a number of years, perhaps even 50. I don't know, because on the documentation, maybe the planning officer will be able to enlighten me. I haven't seen the life expectancy. So it is different on that basis, in that they are one-off events or they're regular events. They are not presenting themselves as anything permanent, as this structure, as this development is.
So yeah, I tend to agree with you on that one. My next question would basically, so you said that you had 2 weeks to obviously get petitions, which is in line with our planning policies.
Yes.
If, for example, say you had longer, say a month, do you believe that you would have got considerably more signatures?
Absolutely. Sorry, Councillor Bond, I interjected there.
No, that's okay. I'd finish.
Okay. Yes, I believe we would. All the signs were that there were still a lot of people out there, and I think the portal evidence is in line with that. Many more people were able to come on the portal and express their views, some in support and some, but overwhelmingly objecting to the development. So I think, yes, and also it would have enabled us to have spoken to more people, because as I have explained, a lot of the people that we actually spoke to were unaware of this development or had little knowledge of this development and the impact that it was going to make, not just on Ferry Meadows, but on their visits to Ferry Meadows.
Perfect. Thank you. And my final question for you, if you'll indulge me.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you're a local kind of user of Ferry Meadows. It's been mentioned about the parking situation. is this something you've experienced as you've travelled there, or?
Yes, Councillor Bond, I'm quite happy to tell you I'm a very local resident. I actually back on to the park, so I'm a frequent user. And yes, we have noticed that the parking situation has, since I think it was 5% increase in parking charges down at Ferry Meadows, we have noticed more cars parking along Wistow Way and in the local estates that access into Ferry Meadows. So, and I would imagine, and I would envisage, I should say, that if this proposal were to go ahead, additional car parking, etc., I don't believe that would alleviate those problems within our estates, our local estates.
Brilliant, thank you. That's my questions answered. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one more speaker, and this is Victoria Johnson. You there, Victoria? Hello, Victoria.
Hello.
Welcome to the meeting. You have 5 minutes when you're ready to address.
Thank you very much. It's difficult to find things left to talk about now, really, coming last, because everybody else seems to have done most of it, really. But yeah, Andrew's kind of asked for the lifespan of the wall, really, which would be interesting. I don't know in this length of time whether people are able to give that or have that information, because presumably, for example, 50 years, what happens to it at the end of that, because this big building that's going to be substantially placed there is going to take a lot of taking down and will presumably cost a significant amount of money also. So I'm kind of picking up snippets really of things that haven't been mentioned. I've obviously put 3 submissions through last night, which you've all hopefully had the chance to read. But kind of one of the things that we kind of picked up was the heart of the park, which is where this wall is going, affords some of the best views, some of the scenic views across the park in every direction, and especially up to Casterhangland over the lake itself. I myself took my mother there when she was still alive. She had mobility issues, she was quite frail, and we'd sit in the car, and I remember that because it was valuable. And I also know lots of other people who kind of recall those stories to me as well. And there's lots of memories built down there. That is the main meeting place. That is the hub of the park. That's where groups meet. That's where disabled minibuses goes with young people of all ages who haven't necessarily got the mobility issues around there. Now, I know how many memories are made. And when we spoke to people in that first petition thing, and we spent a substantial amount of time talking to people just because they knew so little about it. So I have no doubt we could have got those numbers well up from that. And they would talk about the memories that they've made down there with their families and going there and taking their kids and picnics and relatives that have since died, and all the kind of memories. And they are emotionally involved with it. Yes, they are passionate, as we are passionate about it. Why wouldn't you be, really? And it's to rule that out as because I know Neen Park are kind of encouraging people to go further up the valley now. That's assuming people have got the mobility to go up the valley. And at the end of the day, well, also, why should they? Why should they lose the best place in the park for a climbing wall, which kind of describes itself as most of the activities taking place within the wall, basically. And climbers have said, well, if you're inside a wall, you can't see anything outside anyway. So on that basis, it doesn't need to be placed in the park. We have never from the beginning been against a climbing wall. We have always been against its location, and we've not moved from that. And we still don't see that that's kind of been justified any other way. And up the valley, we've done the walk up the valley. I'm just trying to find the bits now that I haven't talked. I've also submitted as well issues on pollution, which you should have as well within your documents. And the most recent one, as you can see, came half an hour after the submission that I'd put in. And that was regarding to a report that had been commissioned on pollution, and it cited Cambridge and Peterborough. And that should kind of spell those bits out. The location of the park is actually not in the town centre, so it's to the side. It's kind of not that accessible. And the only way you can access really by car is along Oundle Road. There is no way you can avoid Oundle Road, whichever direction you go in. Now, we spent 12 hours doing a traffic survey one day really, and we didn't pick the busiest junction, I hasten to add, on Oundle Road. How God only knows what the future of that will bring. It was seriously unpleasant sitting there counting cars and the directions and the numbers and stuff. That is also on the portal as well earlier on. Now that was significant. Even at off-peak times, it was still a very busy road. And for people who access Oundle Road at varying times of the day, they will all kind of raise their hands as to, oh, hours we've spent sitting on there, either in queues or chugging along, or roadworks, which I know happen on every road at the end of the day. But it's still a significant road. It's one of the main arterial roads off the A1, where they've improved the access off the A1 through Old Walton. You've got the showground that used to be a showground that is now absolutely covered in the houses, but there's 450 more to go up there. There's another 130 houses.
30 seconds left.
Walton. And the impact of that, plus the 499 at Haddon, which I can't believe isn't going to have an impact as well. So I'm kind of going for that, really. My kind of concern is the pollution and the kind of vehicles that you bring in there. And if climbers have got huge packs of climbing kit, they're not coming on a bike and they're not walking with it. So those are my concerns as well, to add to everybody else's. And I'm sure people will ask me about some of the things I submitted earlier, so I'll wait and see on that one.
Thank you very much. Okay, members have any questions, please? Victoria. Councillor Bond.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm guessing you're a regular user. It's been mentioned a lot about the disabled access. Do you know anyone personally who you've spoken to who
Yes,
kind of
I
use
do.
it, and are they fearful of them losing access to it, as it were?
They are. They are, and they also did when we were able to speak to them. Really, and I go back to that original survey which we did, which was too long years ago now. So it's casting my memory back at it. It's kind of gone on forever. This has, as I'm sure everybody will agree. So yes, we did have that, but we also went on to the kind of car parking issues, and there was sadly some local residents, not local to where we live, but local to Peterborough, that said they loved Ferry Meadows, but they couldn't afford to go any longer because they couldn't afford the car parking fees. And I would like to suggest to Neam Park Trust, because I've seen it work elsewhere, in a town in Norfolk, for disabled users, they act, as long as you show your badge, they add an extra half hour onto your parking restrictions. So if you've got walking restrictions and you can only walk very slowly, or you've got impact of getting kits in and out of the car and things.
Thank you, Victor. That's not the answer to the question. I do appreciate what you tried to do there.
Sorry.
But it's not the answer to the question. So.
But that's okay. Thank you. Yeah, you answered it. Thanks.
No, I do appreciate what you. Councillor Hogg.
You say that it's been noticed that there's been a lot of cars not opting for parking in the car park because of the rise in car parking charges, the 5% rise that happened. I think it's fairly obvious that this proposal is in order for the Impact Trust to have a revenue stream to come in to help with the running of the park. If it wasn't to go ahead, I'm just trying to work out what you would feel would be the best way for the park to increase their revenue to make up the shortfall that not having this scheme would do. I mean, the obvious choice would be to increase car park charges again, I would suggest.
Can I just interject just for a second, please, just to let you know that we've got about 2 minutes left for questions and answers. So please, if you can keep your answers fairly short and brief, because you've got another one to come. Thank you.
I think there's a balance between the car parking fees, and I think you have to kind of almost make it a bit cheaper, frankly, to get more people to use it and get more people in. If you get to the point where the car parking fees are too high, then you put more people off going to there to park in the first place. And I think because it's a country park and it's a big area, therefore, the first hour at £1.80, there isn't a great deal you can do in an hour. And so that makes it more expensive. So you have to get that balance right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quick. You just said about reducing the car park fees to get more people in, but then you're going against that because you don't want people in to use this facility. No, my question would be, the previous speaker said this park is for everybody. So why should people who support this application be denied the opportunity to use this proposed climbing wall?
I would say because it's in the wrong place. It's in the country park and it shouldn't be in the country park.
Great, Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your answers. Thank you everybody for addressing committee from the objection side. We are now going to have a break for 10 minutes before we move into the those that are in support. But it will strictly be 20 past that we're going to start again. So please be back online and ready to go by 20 past. Thank you very much.
It's Kim. She moved that well, haven't she?
Hi, Karen, can you confirm everybody's back from the committee point of view?
Yes, I'll just check that, Councillor Harbour. Bear with me.
Would you like us to all raise our hands or something just to indicate that we're all back?
I can see that everybody's back, apart from Councillor Hussain. He's not back in his chair at the moment. We'll ask somebody to give him a call.
Say if he could, please. It doesn't like he's there. Here he is.
Okay, everybody's back.
Thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, we're going to move straight into the supporters that are going to address you today. We'll start with Councillor Fitzgerald, please. Councillor Fitzgerald, welcome. That's not a good start. Is Councillor Fitzgerald missing?
Sorry, Chair, just a bit slow on the fingers finding the unmute button.
Hello, Councillor Fitzgerald. Welcome to this afternoon's committee. You have 5 minutes when you're ready to address them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As ever, members, great to be here today. Always love coming to Planning Committee. As the Deputy Leader of the Council, I must stress I'm not being paid to be here. I come here today as an interested party and as an elected representative. So I believe I've taken a balanced approach to this, and I base what I might say today on this basis. What prompted me, because I had no involvement or particular reason to do this, is that I've received over numerous weeks what I can only describe as a number of shouty emails, and I looked that word up before I made that comment. So that prompted me to take more of an interest. So I have no strong views about the pros and cons of the development.
We've lost you, Councillor Fitzgerald. You've gone on mute.
Somebody muted me. I don't know who it was, Chair. It wasn't me.
Okay.
So which bit didn't you hear? So I have no strong views about the pros and cons of the proposal. It could be a climbing wall. It could be an indoor Olympic bobsleigh track, a downhill ski slope, or my personal favourite, an Olympic curling centre. My position would be the same here. It's not the council's job to advise on any business proposals and their chance of financial success or not. The point being, no matter what is being proposed, ladies and gentlemen, there would always be those in favour and those against, as is the case today. There's been much made of opposition to the proposals, though I would question seriously how many of those supposedly against the proposals actually live here in Peterborough and would be affected. I'm sure there will be a level of objection to the proposals, but there are many more in the majority who may well be wholly in favour of this plan, but they're never fairly represented in these situations, which is primarily the reason why I'm here today, to speak up to for those majority. Councillor Hogg made the point earlier in the meeting that often those against something are generally the most vocal about it. And I would remind you there are 200,000 people plus that live in this city, the majority of which we haven't heard from. So my inbox and that of fellow councillors, having checked, has not been swamped with emails opposing the plan. And I know this is the case for both our MPs in the city because I took the trouble to check. Yes, there have been a small but very vocal minority of people who are present here today doing the shouty thing at councillors, and all who will listen, but not many others that I'm aware of have been making those remarks to councillors or indeed the council. The silent majority are the people who elect us to make these kind of decisions for them. And I've spoken to many of them myself during the last 2 weeks and found a majority in favour of the application. I can say that this administration wants to promote employment and economic growth across the city. One of these strands is to develop more leisure and sports opportunities, and at the same time promote healthier lifestyle options. And in my view, this application ticks many of those boxes. At the same time, though, we would want to balance any growth and ensure that it fits with our local plans and policies and sync these with our green aspirations and our desire to safeguard the environment. This does not mean we should not be bold in our outlook, and to many, this proposal is certainly that, and could even be deemed as an iconic site once built. I, of course, recognise that all the people here today are entitled to their own views and opinions, which may be at odds with the officer recommendation, but that's what makes the world go round. It is the council's responsibility to think about the whole of the city's interests, not just those that live on the doorstep of the proposed application site. The height and sighting has also been raised numerous times as a concern, but what is one man's meat, to coin a phrase, is another man's gravy. It's indeed a subjective matter, and I'm sure 900 years ago the locals felt the very same about the plans to build a massive cathedral, which today dominates the city's skyline for miles around. How wrong would they have been as we love it today? Or were the residents in London more recently aghast when the Shard was built, totally out of keeping with the historic locale? On the application itself, I'm not going to get into the minutiae about the planning policies, as officers have advised on this. As for concerns regarding bats, bees, birds, newts, and all other types of flora and fauna, this has been more than well covered in all comments and replies in the report. Safe to say that I'm personally satisfied that all the objections and concerns have more than adequately addressed by our officers and the relevant experts within the council. Otherwise, I would not be speaking in favour of it today. Just one flawed thinking, by the way, on transport and pollution. As we move to a more greener environment and petrol and diesel engines are outlawed, pollution will become less, not more. Just food for thought. I am a local resident. Therefore, I don't think there's any justifiable reason to refuse this application before you today, members, and I would recommend that you accept officers' proposals.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. Members, you have some questions, please? Councillor Hogg first.
So this is, I suppose, maybe a bit of a personal question on the part of Councillor Fitzgerald, but I know that, like myself, you have to use Oundle Road on a regular basis, both for your residence, but also your business address. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were regarding the concerns that people have raised in terms of extra congestion on Oundle Road.
Happy to answer that. I did have some notes, but obviously I ran out of time. So let me just say, I do live locally. Councillor Hogg, as you know, we've lived in this area, both of us, for many years. I myself have been a resident of Orton Brimbles and Orton Wistow for a number of years. I currently live in Longville, so I'm a stone's throw. My property backs onto Neam Park Trust land. Oundle Road is a busy road at times, but if you read the report again, our highways team have raised one issue, which is about peak time. And allowances have been made for that. Otherwise, on transportation, our highways team are happy. Look, when you come, and I've said this before, when you go to a city like Manchester or the suburbs around there, you think we have bad traffic? My golly, you ought to go to places like that. we are fortunate that we have one of the fastest travel times anywhere in the UK in this city. Our road network is superb. There are pinch points, of course there are, but I don't think, and I'm happy to go with officers. Look, we pay these people a lot of money to work on these planning applications, and we've got to take their advice as being genuine. So our highways team are satisfied that everything will work with a restriction at peak times on days when there may be competitions and the like. So speaking as a local resident who lives in the area and has done since 1980, I'm a user of Ferry Meadows, my grandchildren are, I don't see that this would present any level of unacceptable harm, and it is that balance that the benefits outweigh any harm that might occur because of this proposal. And again, I've looked into this now, and I come from this, you know, I'm not pro climbing. I'm you know, if Need Park Trust want to do that, that's up to them. That is not for us to determine in terms of a council. And I heard comment about, you know, well, what if it's not successful? Well, that's their decision. That is not our decision, and the traffic and the implications have been addressed adequately in the report. Hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I was on mute. Hi, Councillor Fitzgerald. It's nice to see you. Just a couple of questions. The first is, obviously, you're quite a key person in the administration of the council minute. Could you just clarify if the business case of the climate wall has been thoroughly inspected? Because obviously it's been questioned, is it actually financially viable?
Without wishing to suck eggs, I don't think the business case is relevant to the planning application. As I've said, how the park runs its finances and what it charges for car parking or how it runs things is not a matter, it's not a planning matter. The fact is, if anybody has any concerns about how the charity runs its business, then I suggest they refer to the Charity Commission about whether or not it's running in a fit and proper manner. I don't think it's for the planning committee or members to determine the pros and cons of whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. As I said, it happens to be a climbing wall, but if it was an indoor, you know, bobsleigh track or, you know, a clog making factory, that is not for us. I think what is relevant is the siting, the height, and all the other things that go with it, and they have all been addressed in the planning application, and it comes down to balance about what is acceptable in terms of does the positives outweigh any negatives, and I come down on the fact that the positives do outweigh what might be small negatives. So I hope that makes sense, Councillor Bond, and I'm sure Nick Harding will tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. It was more of a curiosity question just because we have you here, and obviously you, as I say, you're a key member, but no, fair enough.
Well, okay. If you want me to answer out of a planning,
I'd rather you didn't, because it's not.
Well, I don't want to, Councillor Harper. I don't want to, but if you want, I was going to say, talk to me offline about the business plan, or talk to the chief executive.
Timeline for other people. It's not.
Sorry, Chris. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. I just have one other quick question, then, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
We obviously, it's been questioned about the number of responses that we've had. Are they all local? Well, we've just had a previous speaker who said she's got a local petition that she's handed out with significant numbers that are local people from the local area. Do you have any kind of numbers that you've spoken to, obviously, in support of it?
Well, look, you've got to take this in the round. So, you know, if 10,000 people objected, and you go, okay, there's 10,000 people objected, does that mean there are another 190,000 actually then that are in favour? Councillor Hogg made the point himself that actually the silent majority, the ones that elect us to make the decisions for them, are the ones where we have to take a balanced view. And the fact is, I would say there are more people for it if you're just working on numbers, you know, rounded to 200,000 population, compared with, you know, the amount of people that have actually submitted. I know there was an online petition prompted by a celebrity, which I wouldn't give it the paper it's written on, in terms of, you know, if you actually put something out on social media that's national. Well, I'm interested in the local views of residents. Of course I am, citywide. My personal canvassing has been through colleagues, through friends and family. I have a son that lives in Orton Brimbles, you know, but I come to this with no real, you know, one way or another, but let's hear from the silent majority as well. People in your family, people, you know, in the ward, people in other wards across the city. You're right, because I get around the city because of the job I do. I canvass a wide range of people and views, and most of them have been positive, not negative.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm trying to get a balance of how many of these people are actually local or not. That was all. I was just asking on the rough numbers.
Well, unless the applicant can say they've got a name and address and a postcode for every single one of them, then I don't really think, you know, it's a valid proposal in terms of the numbers being put forward.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions for Councillor Fitzgerald? No. Thank you very much, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, if I can now invite Jackie Bland, please. Hello, Jackie, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hello, Jackie.
Hi,
Jackie, welcome to the meeting. You have 5 minutes when you're ready to address committee.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for this opportunity to support the Lakeside Activity Centre on behalf of the Neen Park trustees. This is my first official duty on behalf of the board as the chair designate, and I'm very pleased that it involves speaking in support of this. It's, in my view, a very exciting and impressive project in a place that's also been very close to my heart for over 30 years. I've been a regular user of virtually every feature and facility, peaceful and otherwise. I also speak as a previous CEO of the County Sports Partnership and of 2 national disability charities based in Peterborough. Our thanks to everyone who over the past 4 years has helped build and amend the proposal to take account of the needs of so many stakeholders, and special thanks to the PCC planning team for their incredibly detailed report. It's not my intention to go into any of the technical details here. I have colleagues who have been involved in this for a lot longer, but I want to share some of the colour and excitement of this proposal. Central to Neen Park's mission as a charity is the support of healthy lifestyles. We do this in many ways, including through the provision of leisure and recreational facilities within what we regard as a peri-urban park within an urban area, and by providing and caring for a wide range of natural environments extending into our rural estate. Our work involves the careful management of the interface between these offers. Our high-performing staff team includes professionals, some of whom are national experts in their field, across all these areas. In the tradition of park management, we follow what's known as a honeypot approach, where we provide some areas which are a hub for activity, socialising and eating, and other areas which are created and left for peaceful enjoyment. The proposal before you today is the development and improvement of one of our existing honeypot areas at Lakeside. It does not propose a new one. The proposal fulfills our aim to provide more opportunities for developing health and well-being by broadening the reach of our recreational facilities. When the Neen Park Trust developed its master plan to the year 2050, the team consulted widely across the city in order to determine ways in which we could have a greater impact, including on mental and physical health. Among the needs that emerged was a requirement for a wider and more exciting range of activities, and in particular, recreational activities that could be accessed all year round in poor weather. It was also important, both in terms of our charitable values and to those we consulted with, that any new provision was inclusive and accessible to people of all backgrounds, ages and abilities, and to families with young children. It's in this context then that we've developed the detailed proposal before you today. The Lakeside area is already a busy hub, including existing large buildings, car parks and outdoor pursuits activities. It does, however, lack indoor activities. In poor weather, the car parks can be empty. We anticipate that families and groups and schools would be attracted by the diverse range of recreational choices, the access to indoor activity in the winter months, the nature-based toddler play area, Clip and Climb, which is available as a play activity for families and requires very little equipment, the cafe with magnificent views across the lake, and improved opportunities for meeting and socialising for all groups. The landmark building will be set in an attractive, newly landscaped area, which will include significant improvements in disabled access, including new areas from which to view the lake by car, and which has been carefully planned around concerns for environmental impact and improving wildlife diversity. I should add, as a trust dedicated to nature, wildlife and climate change mitigation, we maintain an ongoing commitment to improvement in these areas as part of our core work. I want to take a moment now to elaborate on why we're putting such a focus on climbing. In 2017, when the Trust was considering how best to meet this need for new recreational initiatives, the Association for British Climbing Walls recorded 1 million visits to indoor walls in the UK, with an estimated 15 to 20% rate of annual increase. We wanted to bring this popular and in-demand activity to the people of Peterborough. The popularity of the activity has now been reflected in the inclusion for the first time of climbing as an Olympic sport. We want the activities we offer to improve both physical and mental health, and climbing has been proven to do that for participants of all ages. Climbing has long had a reputation for being inclusive. As a CEO of Disability Chapter, I've experienced myself the first-hand success and joy that blind, deafblind, and people with limited ranges of physical ability have achieved through paraclimbing. And finally, if I may, why do we propose an Olympic standard climbing facility? Climbing is a sport that allows people to reach beyond what they thought their limits were, to dream and to aspire to greater achievements and greater heights. We don't want to put any limit on people's dreams. We want to offer this facility as somewhere you could enter as a small child, just for play with your family, and leave perhaps years later as a potential Olympic competitor from Peterborough. And that means for everyone, whatever their ability. We've been very proud as a trust of what Sailability has achieved. I have two more lines, has achieved on the waters of Neen Park, and hope to replicate this success on the walls of the Lakeside Activity Centre by developing it to become a home for paraclimbing, both regionally and potentially nationally. Thank you very much.
Okay, members, do you have any questions, please, for Jackie? Jackie, oh, well, I've got somebody coming through. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Jackie. I'm very interested in how one's going to see the use of the new building by people who are not going to go climbing. I mean, you mentioned the views across the lakeside and so on. I just wondered if you could cover that, particularly with your experience within disability area. I'm concerned about those current disabled users who are concerned about the impact of this new building on their access to the area.
Yes, well, we have made provision for replacement car park areas where people could actually drive up in their car and look over the lake. And in fact, my understanding is that those car park spaces give a better view across the lake than the current access, which actually does have to be viewed over an embankment. And of course, in putting in a new facility like this, we have to make the entire surrounding area disabled friendly, both for people who have visual disabilities and people who have mobility disabilities, and that's a much needed improvement in this area anyway. There'll be a cafe where you can just go and sit, you don't have to climb, go and sit and look at the view. For families, there will be a nature-based, nature-themed toddler area, which again is a facility that is much needed at the moment. A lot of parents are certainly telling me that there's no provision for families with young children, especially when the weather's bad. And then the clip and climb area, I'm not sure that people understand that this is not really a special kind of professional sporting facility, but this is a very broad activity that children love. Children and young people, it's a very natural activity, climbing, and where there's the opportunity to do it, many people will want to take up that opportunity as a new entertainment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Thank you very much for your presentation, Jackie. In your presentation, you identified the advantages of the scheme, such as climbing. What I understand from the objectors, they are not against the scheme. They are in favour of it. What they are against is the location. What do you have to say about the location? Thank you.
Well, I will possibly invite one of my colleagues to come in after I've commented in terms of the disability. But the idea of this is not just to plonk a climbing wall somewhere in Peterborough because we think climbing is a good idea, but it's to extend the offer of the Neame Park Trust to people in Peterborough and to try to reach out to a broader range of people. If you want to have a truly accessible climbing wall, you have to landscape the area around it so that it's disabled accessible. That wouldn't necessarily be the case somewhere else. But we also want people to be able to come to the park, which is, you know, what we offer for a range of different activities and experiences, and to have some choice. So you can arrive as a family in the park, and some people might go climbing and some might go paddleboarding, and somebody else might walk off in 10 minutes. You're in the rural estate walking beside the river. It's part of an integrated offer, not just the building of a climbing wall. I don't know whether any of my colleagues want to step in to answer that question. I think we had an agreement, as I am so new, that people could back me up.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to speak if you'd like me to.
Yes, I mean, obviously, everything you're doing, you're eating into the 30 minutes that everybody's got. So please, if you can keep it.
Well, I think Jackie's answered that really well, and Councillor Iqbal, I think that this integrated offer is really important, and it was acknowledged by one of the objectors who spoke earlier that this is an area, a hub of activity where people come and meet and collect already. And that was our intention from the off, that this is a sort of a central hub in the park where we can bring people together to do a range of activities. And clearly this is an offer that attracts a very wide range of participants from across the city and acts as a gateway into that wider park as well. So we're really keen to do something for young people and young adults who often tell us there isn't something at Neame Park for them. We know there's the nature for them. We know there's other things in the park they'll enjoy. And if we can get them there, we can then bring them on and encourage them to enjoy the other parts of the park.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate your input there. Councillor Hogg.
I just wanted to touch further on the use of the word honeypot in your presentation. I get from that essentially what you're saying is that this is to try and reach further than maybe the traditional area that people would travel to come to the park, and that by people coming to use the climbing wall, that they would then be encouraged to return and then use other facilities at a later stage once they've realised what a gem we have here in Peterborough.
Certainly, yes. Certainly, I think that's one interpretation of honeypot. The other one is that, if you like, we're attracting the bees, and most of the bees go to the honeypot areas, but if any bees want to go out into the countryside and enjoy the rural areas, then they're also free to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Bond.
Thanks, Chairman. And if this is not a planning relevant question, please do correct me. But we've heard talk about other sort of climbing walls in the past. What are you guys going to do differently to make sure that this does stay viable, basically? That's okay.
I think I'll pass you over to Andrew.
Do a quick answer on it for me, because it's not a planning consideration at all, as we've said. But if you want to quickly answer,
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer again if you like, and I'll do it very briefly.
Yes, sir.
So one of the key things is this offer is not a purely commercial offer by a commercial operator. We are a trust that have health and well-being as the central objective of what we're trying to achieve, and have undertaken a range of work to understand what is the offer that gives that broadest range of impact for people in the city. I think also the scale of the proposal in some ways is overstated, but as one of the councillors sort of tried to pick out earlier, what is it? Is it not viable, or is it over commercialisation? We currently have about 2 million visits to the park. This proposal is, as stated within the planning documents, just over 100,000 visits. So when you break that down to days, that's about 5,500 people visit the park a day already. We're talking about a few hundred more a day. Obviously, that's a very simplistic way of putting it, but in the scale of the use of this park, which is already a regional facility, it's not a huge impact. And viability-wise, our trustees are clearly very concerned about that. Councillor Fitzgerald made a very clear point that it's not a planning issue, but clearly we would be negligent in our duty to pursue an activity such as this if it wasn't thought to be viable. and it's been very, very heavily scrutinised by our trustee board.
Good, thank you again.
Brilliant. Thanks for indulging my curiosity.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Iqbal, you again, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to make a follow question anyway. But reading the objections from the local residents who raised concerns about this scheme, they've raised fears that Neen Park Trust could make any future applications for sports centres. Now, Andrew, if I'm correct, in your response to me, you used the word hub. Doesn't that give some indication that you may consider expanding even further in the near future?
So, Mr. Chair, that's directed at me again. So I'd probably suggest the opposite, Councillor Iqbal, that this is a hub and it's a contained area of activity with the distinct intention of not spreading that out into other areas of the park. Although we have plans to improve our facilities at Thorpe Meadows and Rural Estate and across the park to improve the wider park for visitors, this type of activity and this distinct sort of adventurous activity is clearly defined within this hub, and therefore that's where we intend it to be, and for it not to incrementally trickle out around the rest of the park.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for letting me come back. The one question I think that has struck me most is one I'm also familiar with other parts of the trust land, which is in my ward, which is the concern about the lack of use of the parking you provide because of charging. With this plan of an additional car park, do you think that you are going to be able to cope with the number of cars that potentially come to the site, or are we going to see yet more objections because they're not going to be using the facilities that you have within the plan?
You, Andrew.
I think, yeah, possibly to me again. So the new car park, the intention of the new car park is to address issues we have with the current car park, which isn't very efficient use of space and pools water, doesn't drain effectively, and is a health and safety issue during the winter. The new car park increases the spaces substantially, but is also far better planned. You know, the current car park is 40 years old, and obviously the city has grown massively since then, as have cars actually. So the new car park is far better laid out for access. And whilst there is some issues locally with cars parking on adjacent streets, the council are looking at that. We're working with the council to look at that as well. I think that's an unrelated issue specifically to this scheme. As I mentioned in an earlier response, the scale of increase compared to the numbers that already visit the park is not that great. And it's an issue, I think, with a regional attraction that is so popular that will occur. I think it's happened more during the COVID lockdown, as there were occasions where we weren't able to open the car parks, and obviously that meant that people went against government advice and travelled to come to the park and then parked in adjacent streets. So I think it's been exacerbated over the last year with the current circumstances we're all under, but ordinarily, whilst it is an issue and we're keen to support our neighbours in trying to address it, we don't feel it's as significant as possibly being made out.
Thank you.
Okay, Andrew, can I come back in at that point? Because you've mentioned something there that I ask a question. Are you this new car park that's beside the bear with me please members, beside the proposal, this new car park, will it be a chargeable car park? Is that the intention?
Yeah, so Ferry Meadows currently there is a camera based NPR system as you come into the park, and you can pay before you leave, either at the machines or buy an app to pay for the car park. So the new car park will be part of that system.
Right, that's what I thought you'd say. You also said something about, I think the wording was not particularly a big effect, which is the amount of extra vehicles. Now, obviously, we've heard all the way along here that you're trying to attract more people, more clients to come in and use your facility. And we've had figures bounded around of 200 vehicles a week, 100,000 perhaps visitors, extra. If they don't want to park in there now, and they're parking in the side streets, what's your view on how with the council do you think you're going to encourage them to come into your car park?
I think I'd say the vast majority of visitors to Neen Park park within the car parks. That's clear, and is happening. People use the car parks. The vast majority of feedback we get is that people are happy to pay. When we changed car park charging from weekends only, which it has been for many years, to being during the week and at weekends, the majority of the feedback was positive, that people were happy to pay for a resource which they valued in the city. And although we recognise that car parking can be a barrier for some people, We are looking at other approaches to improve that. So the transport statement made significant mention about how the park's well connected. We're doing a lot of work to promote those connections, particularly around cycling and walking. One of the councillors mentioned that they live in Longthorpe currently. There will shortly be a new bridge that the council is making over the parkway that then improves access to the northeast part of the park. So there's a huge amount of improvements that enable people to come to the park without coming in their car. And conversely, we'd very much like to see that. You know, obviously it's great when people come in and pay for car park, and it really helps maintain the park. But actually getting people coming in by bicycle or on foot, you know, will be a vast improvement to us. We currently have charging points which are free to use, as we're keen to also encourage people to come in electric vehicles, which will, as another councillor I think mentioned earlier, you know, be the future, and the nature of sort of air pollution coming into the park will hopefully decrease over current use.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bond, you have another question?
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick one. Following on from the car parking questions, would a possibility of encouraging people to use car park would be to validate their parking for people who are using the climbing wall? Could that be one option to encourage them to use it?
Yeah, it's very likely that there will be some sort of beneficial offer by your using car parking and using the activity centre at the same time. Certainly some of the options for using the activity centre will be sort of annual passes and such like, and similar to our fishermen that currently may have annual passes to come into the park, there will be arrangements around car parking for that as well.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Jackie, too, for your address earlier. We'll now move on then to Ian Forsyth. Ian, are you there?
Yes, I'm Chair. Thank you very much.
Hello, Ian. Welcome to the committee.
Officers, councillors and speakers. I'm very pleased to be able to speak today because Ferry Meadows, Neen Park, has been very much part of my life. I am a resident since 1968 in Peterborough. Was made a Deputy Lieutenant of Cambridgeshire in 2019. And I got a feeling then that I'd been doing something right. And one thing that I have done is run businesses in the area for 30 years. But living in Alton Waterville for 26 of those years, I've been a regular user 3 or 4 times a week into the Ferry Meadows facility. And I have to say that I find it to be an absolutely fantastic facility. And I sometimes feel concerned about what the future holds in a world of ever rising costs. And I've seen various things that Ferry Meadows has tried to do to make it more sustainable, to charge for parking. But I've always seen them do everything with a sympathetic mind to the people who live locally. But one of the reasons for me speaking today was that one of my roles is as a Director of Opportunity Peterborough, something that I've volunteered for the last 9 years. And for those who know Opportunity Peterborough, they know that it involves economic generation and jobs for our city. And one of the things that Tom Hennessy and his team often do is to take applications and inquiries from companies who are looking to relocate. And as part of that relocation proposition, we sell the virtues of Peterborough. And I think you can see the heritage that Peterborough has, and you can see the culture that Peterborough has. And then I saw this application for the climbing wall. So attending a wedding in Edinburgh in February of 2020, I went to the Edinburgh Climbing Centre, and what I witnessed was quite remarkable. A vibrant environment, full of laughter, full of different age groups, people of all abilities. And I thought, this is amazing. What I'd heard was that there was going to be this ugly monstrosity of a building in Ferry Meadows that wasn't right. And when I came back with that picture and then began to look more closely, what I saw was a first-class application that crossed every T and dotted every I. And I was so pleased last week when the planning department of the council, who are paid officers, are asked to make decisions based on the merits of an application, that they decided that they would recommend this for approval. And what I would say is that if the growth in Peterborough is to be sustained in future years, we see the university, we see 2 new schools being built this week, we see all of the apartments in our city centre. How do we attract and retain the quality of employees, the quality of teaching staff, those that we need to build the vibrance of the city that I believe the majority want it to be. And what I say to the committee today is, please look at the bigger picture of what the city is creating. Look at the people who were the visionaries of Fletton Quays and how that development has changed overall perception of Peterborough. The aerial photographs that have recently been circulated. And then look at the proposal that is going into Ferry Meadows. It is divisive in the nature of the application. Unfortunately, architecture divides people. But what it will do is it will give a unique selling feature for a multidisciplined Olympic climbing wall within the city of Peterborough for everybody to enjoy or ignore, whichever they would like to do. Of the 200,000 people who live in the area that Councillor Fitzgerald said earlier, I walk in Ferry Meadows and see very few people at certain times of the year. I wouldn't like to run a business that worked on a 6-month income stream because it's virtually impossible. What we have is a chairman who has been able to work and create a towns fund to create a better environment. And what I suggest is, why don't we put the electric ferries on the river and take the people to the climbing centre from the city centre? Peterborough is a great offer and it needs a unique feature in this climbing centre, and who knows, hopefully a snow dome and a velodrome in the future. And I would urge the councillors to look favourably on this application.
Thank you, Ian. Members, do you have any questions, please, for Ian? No? Okay, thank you very much, Ian. Oh no, I've got a question come through. Councillor Jones.
Sorry, Chair. Couldn't get on the hand raise button quickly enough. Ian, thank you for that. It is divisive by its nature. And in this particular instance, you know, we're talking about things like snow domes and indoor ferret racing tracks, as Councillor Fitzgerald mentioned. When we talk about snow domes, when we talk about the other items, where would you envisage them being built? Because the arguments against building the wall is not building the wall, it's where it's going to be built. You know, this is the wicked issue that we have to deal with. Nobody, I doubt, is against the wall. But if we were to build other things of this scale, where would you see them being built throughout the city as a businessman and long-term resident?
I think when you look at the city has been built on the hub of 4 major roundabouts of the city, north, south, east and west. And of course, if you bring in this facility to the Park Trust, that gives them the ability to sustain the future commercially. So that leaves them commercially viable, and that's the trustees and the directors and the team at the trust. So that then makes that facility sustainable for the future. And it's for others to come forward, commercial landowners or others, who would see those facilities as being at other parts of the city. I don't think you have a conurbation of all leisure facilities all in one place. That wouldn't be practical. And I know the council's leisure centre for swimming and things like that's going on Fair Meadow. Other considerations that will be made.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Ian. Okay, can I invite Mark Woods then, please?
Hi.
Hello, Mark. Welcome to the committee. You have 5 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. My name's Mark Woods. I'm the CEO of the Cambridge Meridian Academies Trust. We operate 2 schools that connect with the Neen Park area, Neen Park Academy itself and West Town, which is obviously further down towards town. So I represent the views of those 2 schools today and our colleagues who work there. In addition, my 2 children also attend Neen Park, and I don't quite back onto the park, as a previous speaker said, but there's 1 house between me and it. So I'm not very far away, and I've been a user regularly for over 40 years and continue to do so pretty much weekly. On behalf of the Trust, we support this planning application because of the enhanced facilities a healthy all-weather recreation the new activity centre will offer for our students, their families and the wider community. At Neen Park particularly, we take pride in providing a challenging, broad curriculum, including the provision of unique and exciting opportunities for students to take advantage of to develop them as well-rounded, physically and mentally healthy individuals. We already offer our students outdoor and adventurous activity weekends in partnership with such bodies as the Outward Bound Trust, and we also take them to local heritage and cultural sites. And one of the significant issues is quite often our students return from these PGL, etc. weekends absolutely thrilled by the idea of climbing, and we don't have the kind of facilities that we will be able to offer. Indeed, when my own children returned from such trips, we ended up taking trips to Milton Keynes to be able to use their facility. It would considerably enhance the offer that we're able to make, both as a school but also as a family, if the activities were available on a daily, easily accessible basis and became part of our wider PE and wider curriculum offer. Easy links for families to be able to maintain the kinds of interest the children develop through those extending the boundaries of learning opportunities that they could drive through their own weekends, holidays, etc., particularly in an area of a park which draws people in already. And I think quite often when we're planning things, we look to be able to provide activities for all parts of the family when they're going on a visit. Obviously, if there's something there for all, it means that you're more likely to maintain them there. We're really excited by the opportunities that we had with the park, where we quite often take our young people around and they manage to engage, and we would be very, very interested straight away in taking them along for taster sessions and those kind of things so that they could start to engage with hopefully a brand new activity. As a previous speaker already has outlined, climbing has huge advantages as a sport that's accessible to a wide range of abilities and cultures. The principal at Neen Park indeed has worked previously in a school which was fortunate enough to have its own climbing wall, and they developed all sorts of activities for the young people, including many of them who went on to enjoy it at higher levels. For us, it's another opportunity to encourage our young people to develop a passion for their local park. I think it's absolutely crucial. We've heard about various ages using it. There's that gap where you stop being taken by your parents and then you start taking your parents when they're older yourselves. That bit that sits in the middle is something that quite often gets forgotten about. What do we do for our young people? We feel the proposals make an excellent addition to the city's offer to the young people that are coming through our schools. We're already, as I say, fortunate enough to get a great use of the facility of Ferry Meadows to enrich our children's education, and we'd see this as another opportunity to develop that further. The park's an asset for young people whose needs are far too often overlooked in placemaking, and they just become a burden rather than what they are, which is the future. Neen Park's investment in high quality facilities across the park ensure that the children and young adults engaged in activity and nature in a positive way improve themselves further and engage with Peterborough as a place that they wish to remain in, thrive in, and stay and inspire for the rest of their lives. If these proposals go ahead, our trust, certainly our schools, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of wider education leaders in the city, will be making sure we make the very most of it and encouraging what's an excellent opportunity to develop our city further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions, members at all? Councillor Bond.
Thank you. Thank you for your address. So I think you said you're a local resident, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Do you see the parking issues, or do you experience them? Because obviously a lot of other speakers have said that this will increase the parking issues as it were. Is this something you experience as a resident?
I don't have first-hand experience of it, as we're not very near one of the main entrances to the park. However, we see these in nearly everywhere that we visit. We were not long ago at Fine Shade Wood, and there are people who on the way drive up to there seem to think it's reasonable to park on the road up to the wood. Unfortunately, I think you just have people who don't recognise that the money you pay for the parking actually funds the thing that you're going to. I do recognise that there's an issue with it for some folks. I'm not entirely certain I have the expertise to talk about the best way of resolving parking. Unfortunately, schools have our own problems with that one.
Yeah, I appreciate that, to be fair. Thank you for answering the question.
No problem.
Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair Mark. Very nice to see you again. I'm very interested in the curriculum benefits that you see this new planned facility and where it fits in with all of the other activities that you can participate or the children could participate in the park environment. I just wondered if you could give us a little bit more detail about the curricular benefits that this plan will support.
One of the particular values of our trust, as you may be aware, is extending the boundaries of learning. We like to take children out to go and do things that they may not get the opportunity to do in any other way, shape or form. At the moment, we manage to use all sorts of facilities at the park over the time, from golf to cycling to other such adventurous type activities. And as I said, we take them away to places where they go up and round climbing walls. PGL are particularly the company we quite often use in taking them on. I think what we'd do is give children an opportunity to do something different. Children to go and have a try of something which I don't imagine that they'll get a chance to in many other forms, and certainly some of our youngsters wouldn't be able to. Once we can get them encouraged in that, that's when you start to see whether you've got the basis for a weekly club, or indeed you can start to work, as we do with many other local clubs and societies, to get them to be able to go on a more regular basis. For me, it's certainly had the opportunity, and some of my friends, bizarrely, are climbers who went to Stanground College a long time ago. And when I've been talking to them about this, one of them indeed, this is his career, his life, still lives now in the Alps, and he's taken us climbing there. We'd be delighted to be able to use a facility like this, especially when you reach the kind of levels that this is talking about. It's not just pardon my expression, a bog standard climbing wall. This is one which would be a centre of excellence, something which you would hope that young people can use and aspire to. And again, for me, it actually represents one of those things about, again, a previous speaker talked about the things that a city like Peterborough and like Peterborough aspires to be absolutely requires in terms of its sense of placemaking. I think our young people would engage in that very, very quickly, and we find all sorts of things that started to develop from it. And again, I think that draws other people to that part of the park, because it is absolutely superb there. The facilities that are available. I'm not entirely certain that everybody knows the quality of what's in their own city as it currently stands. It's always one of our concerns in education. You'd be amazed at how many parts of our city, many of the young people that we serve, don't actually get to see. It's one of our jobs is to take them there.
Okay, thank you very much. There's no other questions for you, Mark. Mark, the next one was to address was Rob Grover, but I understand he's not in the meeting. Is that right?
No, I spoke on behalf of him as well. Sorry. We put our names down both because we weren't sure. In schools, we can't be sure when we'll be free.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, we'll move on then. Thank you very much. To Lynette Swinburne, Andrew McDermott and Matthew Bradbury. These are the applicant and agent. Unmuted your mics. You'll have 5 minutes between you to address committee when you're ready. So Andrew, I take it you're going first, eh?
Yeah, I won't speak for very long. Obviously very happy to answer more questions, and I've answered several already. Firstly, as we mentioned earlier, I'd like to thank the City Council Planning Department for their conscientious consideration of the application over the last couple of years. Whilst an earlier determination would of course been welcome, we're very pleased to be at committee today with a very heavily scrutinised application, an EIA screening opinion that was ratified in great detail by the Secretary of State, and ultimately an application that's been recommended for approval without any objections from statutory consultees. So that includes in relation to heritage, biodiversity, flooding, highways, amongst all the others, and an acknowledgement from several of the statutory consultees that the scheme will result in a net gain of biodiversity, which I think is a really important point for us as a trust, but from a planning point of view as well. I think I've addressed many of the other issues in some of the questions, and I'm sure there'll be more questions that might come, so I will leave it there for now. I'm not sure if Matthew or Lynette would like to add anything at this point.
Anything else to add?
Nothing from me, but happy to pick up any questions.
Thank you.
Likewise, happy to pick up any questions, but nothing further from me.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Members' questions? Councillor Hogg.
I have a few, not massive amounts, but a few nonetheless. So it's already been touched on the fact that you have plans for encouraging EV vehicles and having on-site charging facilities. I just wondered if somebody could just kind of give us a round on that. But also not just EV vehicles, but EV bikes. At another meeting that we had with the council, it was brought up about the provision for being able to charge EV bike or electric, but e-bikes is going to be quite important if the somebody has cycled to your facilities but doesn't have quite the battery power to get back again, it would be nice to know that there is some sort of plan for charging of the bikes. I will sort of give you the three questions I've got. So that's the first one, charging. The second one is, it was mentioned about semi-permeable surfacing around the building. Is that the same for the car park as well? Because obviously you're replacing what is currently grass with a hard surfaced car park, and I wanted to know, has that been planned in? And then thirdly, about the siting of the resiting of the car park. I believe that the site that's been chosen is currently a kind of overspill car park or an events car park anyway. And so, you know, what are your plans in terms of, if you have an event on, how do you deal with overspill parking? So yeah, basically, what are those plans?
So in terms of charging, so as mentioned, we have some charging points already. At Lakeside, we've got 2 charging points, which are we certainly see some use. They're not always in use, but they're certainly used. And at the moment, those are free to use as well to encourage people to come to the park. We have a slight issue at Lakeside currently in terms of electrical supply. So as part of these proposals, we'd be upgrading the transformer that's at Lakeside, which would give us more capacity, both for the building, although it's designed to be quite low energy use. The intention is that the building itself wouldn't actually use very much electricity, but each charging point uses quite a bit. But there is provision to include more charging points. I think the point about charging bikes is a brilliant one. So we work in partnership with Rutland Cycling, who both hire out electric bikes, but also promote the sale of them. And again, this is a really key point of the strategy in terms of getting people into the park in a more sustainable manner. So I think getting points for them to charge is really important, but also is the secure storage of them as well, which is also included within the proposals. We haven't currently included things about charging EV bikes, but I think it's a very good point. We've got electricity supply to the toilet block, which is just next to where all the cycle parking is proposed to be. So that seems eminently feasible and a very sensible addition. In terms of permeable surface, so around the building, there's a mixture of surfaces. There's quite a lot of landscape beds and new planting. But I think your question was more in relation to the car park surface. So the majority of the car park surface will be a gravel in a sort of a containing mesh. It's called Goldpal. Although the final detailed design specification is still to be done. You know, although we've come a long way to be here, there's still a lot of detailed design within the proposals. However, the car park has been designed to a reasonable level in our negotiations and discussions with Historic England. So the majority of the surface will be permeable, as I say, essentially a gravel that's bound in a mesh so that it doesn't all get shoved all over the place, but water can move through it. There would be some hard surfacing through the car park because the gravel mesh is not as hard wearing as tarmac, but clearly we want to avoid having a large tarmac car park. But given that there will be, you know, as there already is, substantial vehicle movements in the area, we want to make sure that the key lines of access are made out of a very resilient material. Event car parking. So the current car park, or the proposed car park, is on a corner of the meadow that's actually between where the overflow car park is and where the existing toilet block is. So that wouldn't affect the overflow car parking, which is sort of seasonally used. One of the key elements of this proposal is that we would need to manage it very conscientiously in terms of our other commitments in the park. So clearly it wouldn't be sensible for us to arrange an event in the winter when we would need people to park on the overflow car parking, which is grass, and there'd be issues with that. Neither would it be sensible for us to coordinate something on the Easter bank holiday weekend when the park will be very busy. So as has already been mentioned, you know, one of the key plans for this is about spreading the use of the park around the seasons and at round times of the week when otherwise it's not as busy. And the intention of any events in the park, whilst we would certainly, and we do hold events during the sort of better seasons, we plan those conscientiously to avoid issues. And the firework guns was mentioned earlier. One of the key elements of that was that when it finished, everyone left at the same time. That is the sort of thing that we manage and try to avoid. It's a management issue for the park. It's something which is similar to many other country parks and sort of regional venues. So I hope that sort of slightly addresses your questions, but feel free to sort of reiterate the last one. I think I'm not quite sure I got it properly.
No, so I think that probably covered it. It was just so in terms of the charging. So, for instance, with the university car park, that the plans are kind of in the throes, as it were. They're putting in car charging points, but they're also putting in the wiring for extra points, because that is sensible to do at the kind of the building stage, even though there's not going to be the demand. But the forward movement is that there will be more and more EV vehicles on our roads, and so therefore demand is going to increase over time. And what they're doing is they're putting the wiring in so that as and when demand increases, they can then just put the chargers in relatively easily. And I just wanted to make sure that had been covered off.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've discussed about the need for a significant number of charging points, but also the level of utilisation of our existing 2 charging points. So as you've suggested, it's exactly what we've discussed, is that we want to be able to expand that provision in the future, but we don't want to, from the off, immediately put in 20 or 30 charging points. Obviously there's an expense to them initially, but also they may well not be used, but we certainly plan to be in the position to improve that as time goes on. And it's a similar approach to cycle parking, which is recommended that if it's at over 80% capacity regularly, you then increase it. And we use a similar principle in terms of EV charging points.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. In most of the drawings we've seen, the colour scheme of the towers is a sort of a reddish brown colour. Could you tell me why that colour scheme was chosen, and could you look into perhaps having a more neutral colour scheme to match in the surroundings, such as like local warehouses have done, so that it's not such a standout point?
Yeah, so originally, sort of right back well before planning, we were proposing a building made out of Corten steel, which is sort of a similar sort of shade, although that was discounted relatively early on. Or certainly after some of the initial consultation, in terms of the sort of not having a predictable colour tone to it, because it's a material that naturally protects itself by corrosion, and that may have been a darker brown or red, or it might have been a bright orange. So we then moved to looking for a material which had a guaranteed sort of finish. The aluminium cladding which is proposed, and the paint is from an oilseed rape sort of component, so it has good sort of embedded carbon, if you like, and is used renewable material to make it. And the colour tone is that red brick that we've stayed with in terms of, as you say, we could well make the facility blend in a bit, but clearly, as we've said, and has been mentioned by others, the tower is a significant feature, and we're trying to sort of define it in the landscape. As part of the detailed design proposals, we will be considering cladding, and I understand that if approval were to be granted, it would come with a condition to review that and submit proposals for that back to the council, as well as looking at various photo montages and a mock-up on site. So we certainly consider that, and we have undertaken to do so. I think there is a sort of a fine balance between trying to make it blend in, and particularly, as you say, the warehouses and the panels are different colour, that actually close up and in the part where you most often see this from, not flying past on a motorway, is that actually that may not have the sort of effect that would be desired, and that being sort of honest and bold about the building might be a better approach. But we're certainly open to working on that. We've obviously invested in architecture to try and make a building that is significant and sort of could be landmark, but we're very conscious about how it appears as well, and want to make sure that the right decision is made on that.
Councillor Bond.
Thank you very much again, Chairman. I've been in the report, it touches upon archaeological evidence. I tried to get my head around it, but it was a bit beyond me, to be honest with you. Could you just clarify what the archaeological significance of the site could be and what you're going to do to mitigate it? I am aware it's in the report, I just didn't quite get my head around it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll try and do so. I'm not an archaeologist either, but I've certainly got a significant interest in it and have been involved in quite a lot of archaeology in the park over the last few years. So sort of from early on in considering the site and the feasibility of it, we looked at how the site might be arranged. the schedule monument, which covers, as Mr. Harding showed in the plan earlier, sort of covers a very wide ranging area of Ferry Meadows. That, as part of a lottery funded project a few years ago, we had geophys done of that, which you might remember from Time Team, and sort of shows all the features across the meadow, which is really very interesting and quite illuminating. And there are areas of the meadows which show significant habitation. One of the reasons why this project was considered feasible is because in that area of the meadow, area of the field where the scheduled monument is, there was very little picked up on the geophys. It really looked like sort of a blank area. So that's why we undertook some archaeological evaluation in 2018. And in fact, the same archaeologists are on site at the moment doing a little bit of work around the new play area, which was recently granted planning permission. So they undertook a range of evaluation, both on the site of the building, but also on the edge of the monument where the car park will be. They picked up some evidence, but essentially, as I say, forgive me, it's a little bit layman, but the position of the existing car park, the proposed car park, and sort of all the bankside of the river was sort of the marshland edge of sort of the wetland sort of river area. There's evidence certainly of Roman occupation and all sorts across the site. Obviously, Dura Brive is just outside the city, which was once a very, very significant Roman town, and there's Longthorpe Fort as well. So there's been huge amounts of activity in the area. And the archaeologists, from the work they've done there, have seen what they would expect, which is various deposits from different times, mostly either probably discarded while people were grazing cattle in those areas or washed up as part of floodwaters across those areas. So one of the things that's mentioned in the report is a natural alluvium layer, which has sealed the archaeology. So that is where the waters have come up and receded and come up and receded over the years, and when the river was moving. And that's what's sealed in these sort of variety of finds. Some of them are tree throws, which is when trees have been cleared and cut and burnt. So there are some signs of archaeology, but it broadly confirmed what the geophys had earlier presented. And it's something which we're interested in. We continue to work on, and hopefully we'll be able to do some community archaeology in the next couple of years on some different areas of the monument.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. And I've been a very regular visitor to the park. I've talked in the past to people involved in sailability, and they've said that the height of the water sports centre at 10 metres, and I don't know how true this is, so if you or somebody could tell me, will the tower have any effect in terms of the wind and the way it blows onto the lake? Because I keep hearing about these dead spots that occur on the lake. How will this, or will it affect it at all? Andrew, can you tell me?
Yeah, so we operate Nean Outdoors Water Sports Centre at the moment. So we do sailing on the lake. We support sailability as well as offering courses and doing our own sailing on the water. Obviously, we wouldn't want to curtail that business or cause ourselves any issues with this building, and it's been something that we've reviewed internally. I think there are certainly changes in the water because of the trees next to the lake and the buildings, what have you, but we don't see this as having a significant impact on the way we use the water currently or on sailing on the lake. It would certainly be counterproductive to our aims and the other work that we've done for us to propose something that would cause those sort of issues. So it is something that we've reviewed and feel comfortable with through assessing the proposals.
So it would have no adverse effect. Sorry, Chair. It would have no adverse
Well, I think whatever the level of effect that we think it would have, we don't think it's going to be an issue for us from a sailing point of view, or not significant enough to cause us any real issues with our sailing opportunities. And clearly we want to encourage and promote sailability. And I think as Jackie mentioned, we'd hope to, sailability is a very seasonal offer at the moment, obviously. People aren't out in the water in winter, but what we'd really hope to do is establish a sort of a complementary offer in a climbability, if you like, in terms of in the centre, and the two to work well together. So it would, it would no way meet our aims to cause significant issues to sailing on the lake.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bond, is your hand still up, or is it a new question?
Oh, sorry, no, it's a legacy hand.
A legacy hand. Well done, thank you. Anybody else wish to come in and ask any questions? No, see no more hands coming up. Okay, thank you everybody for your for addressing committee. Okay, members, questions to officers, legal officer, traffic officer, planning officer. Any questions? Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. It's the transport or the traffic question, I suppose, that's come up throughout the paperwork and through some of the objections about how we're going to ensure that we can manage additional traffic, particularly on competition days, and what the impact is likely to be otherwise. I'm just interested to know what the transport view is about this addition to the Oundle Road.
Okay, Nick, it's yours.
Thank you, Chair, and for you. We've assessed the transport statement that was provided by the applicant in depth. We're content that overall there's it's acceptable within the limits what we sort of specified. In terms of the condition that we've proposed, it's going to limit the what events can be sort of planned for peak times. So that would be 8 till 9 and 5 till 6 on weekdays, to prevent any issues with the sort of PM peak that was identified. That was the main concern with our initial sort of feedback. We're confident that that can be mitigated within reason using condition, and we don't have any further concerns relating to the application.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg.
My question is slightly similar. It's to do with highways. I just wondered if being a local resident, I've noticed that the traffic from the showground seems to have depleted somewhat. I mean, obviously this year aside, but the sort of Truckfest, etc. Issues from the East of England showground have reduced year on year, and presumably that mitigates some of the increase that would happen because of this. But my real question is are we able to kind of put some sort of condition that they will work together with the East of England showground? So, for instance, they don't have an Olympic event on the same weekend as Truckfest, but maybe kind of working in conjunction with each other to make sure that their calendars clash as least as possible.
I'm not sure what you can do with that, Nick. Is there anything you want?
Yeah, it might be more of a question for planning. Obviously, it's probably within both organisers' benefit to avoid that situation. Not 100% sure it could be conditioned.
No, I don't think you can. You can't force. To be fair, you couldn't force East of England to take on a planning condition from Ferry Meadows. That wouldn't be seen as fair, would it? But I understand it's a really good point, actually. You know, if East of England's on, or we don't do that anymore, but a major event. Yeah.
But I mean, am I right in saying that the traffic flows have decreased over time because of the use of the East of England showground has declined over the years?
I don't have that information to hand. However, what I can say is that we actively monitor the traffic on Oundle Road through the use of sensors 24/7, 365 days a year. This data is available to us and was sort of utilised in the assessment of the application that we're talking about today. And yeah, we're not overall we're not concerned at the moment over the use. It's within acceptable limits, and the key bit that we identified, which was the PM peak, can be conditioned to avoid any further issues. It's probably worth adding. I mean, it's the council's intention to reduce the use of Oundle Road through encouraging use of the Neen Parkway, and we're looking at ways through working through CPCA funded projects to determine how best that would be achieved at the moment. Yeah, that's probably all I could sort of say on that at the moment. It's sort of acceptable from our point of view.
Thank you.
Subject to condition. Sorry, I'll add that.
Okay, any further questions to officers at all? I think, Nick, you've got away quite lightly today, so I'm going to ask you a question. This is Mr. Harding. There has been quite a bit of mention about suitability of site, sequential tests, etc. and what other areas have been checked and a decision made that none of them are suitable or available. Now that's in the report, so I'm assuming, but are you 100% sure that and comfortable that all reasonable effort has been made to find an alternative site for this particular application?
Through you, Chairman. The important thing for committee members to be recognising is that the policy is a city centre first approach that needs to be taken. And then if you can't find a suitable site in the city centre, you then look towards a district centre location. So what you have to do is look at site size. Is this site actually available, on the market type approach? Is it truly available for the use? Is it actually allocated in the local plan for something else? So as you can see in the committee report, we've got sites which have been looked at that are city centre or edge of centre, and those are allocated for residential development or specifically employment development, and therefore that's had the effect of discounting them. In other cases, the sites have physically been too small to accommodate the proposed development. And during some of the presentations made by the speakers today, reference has been made to other locations, such as, for example, the showground site, as being possible alternatives. Well, yes, they could be possible alternatives, but that location in its own right wouldn't necessarily satisfy the relevant plan policy, because those locations aren't the city centre, they're not a district centre, just in the same way as the application site that's before us today isn't a district centre and it's not a city centre location. But as officers, we are satisfied that the sequential test for both flood risk and for the siting of this leisure use have been sufficiently thorough and robust.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Thank you very much for that.
If I may, Chairman, come back on a couple of other points that have been raised so far this afternoon. In terms of the comments around, where have the objectors and where have the supporters come from in terms of, where they live? Well, that's immaterial. What you have to look at is, why are people objecting and why are people supporting? It's down to the material planning considerations that those representations raise, rather than whether or not they're from locally based people or not. So that's sort of point one. Point two is whether or not the applicant has gone through a thorough enough business case is up to the applicant. That's not a material planning consideration for us when making a decision on the application. And then finally, from me, one of the speakers did jolt my memory, so apologies to the committee member. We have had some late representations that came in since the update report was published. So to go through those very quickly, the representations of objection object to the trust advising committee in their representation to you to ignore the change.org petition. They're concerned that in their eyes, the trust has, in inverted commas, shipped in letters of support. In their view, the objectors feel that the trust hasn't done an extensive public consultation prior to putting the application, and the feedback from the limited consultation they did wasn't hugely supportive of the scheme. They feel it's an unattractive design. The alternative locations haven't been revealed. The application is a done deal in terms of whether or not it gets consent from planning committee. Conflicts of interests of the chief operating officer at the trust, the loss of natural and green space, The proposal conflicts with the council's environment city status and policies, and the proposal conflicts with the local plan. And then we've had late letters of support saying that this proposal would generate a significant asset, a significant recreational resource. It would bring jobs, and it would bring in valuable income into the city. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, and thanks for the update on those. Okay, any questions at all still from anybody towards officers? Doesn't look like we're going to have any more on those, so you're satisfied there. So we'll move now to debate. Who would like to kick off the debate this afternoon? Councillor Hogg.
In the absence of Councillor Hiller. So I came into this very much open-minded because, you know, there was a lot of feeling on both sides of the argument when it came to the sort of documentation that we had prior to the meeting. I have to say that I have been swayed in favour of the application. I think that Neem Park Trust do a fantastic job protecting, which is, you know, the jewel in the crown of the city, our country park. And I think this proposal will help secure their financial future in terms of having an income stream which they are in charge of, as opposed to having to kind of rely on grants and the like. So in terms of the facility itself, it's basically going to be built on what is essentially a leaky 40-year-old car park, which is only usable when it's dry, because at the moment, as soon as there's any kind of rain, it floods and is not particularly usable. I take on board the fact that it will be significant in the skyline in some shape or form, depending on where you're looking. But I don't think that is a particular issue. I think it looks quite striking. I think it's going to draw a lot of people into our city, and hopefully while they're here, they can see, you know, what other attributes that we can provide as a city. I was particularly moved by the talk from the guy from Opportunity Peterborough, saying that, you know, this is the kind of thing that helps sell our city in terms of you know, attracting new businesses and therefore new people to come to the city to make their lives here. So I think it is you know, it's adding a jewel on top of the crown that is you know, part of Peterborough. I think we should be immensely proud of Ferry Meadows as a facility, and I think this will help, you know, take that to the next level. And I think, you know, as I said, Neem Park Trust have done some wonderful work. You know, since I've been in the city, every time I go to the park, there seems to be another improvement, something that's made it just slightly better than it was the last time I was there. You know, I am a regular visitor, so I think there's something to be supported, basically.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. Councillor Bond.
Thank you. I've asked enough questions, so I better have a quick speech. So I am really sympathetic towards all the local residents who have spoken against this, and I am really struggling to come to a decision on it. I mean, there's been lots of words kind of mitigating and acceptable, etc., thrown around, but I guess that's planning for you. I think I am going to support this just because it is a great opportunity for the city centre. And going into this meeting, I really was humming and hawing, but a lot of my questions and concerns that I had have, to be fair, been answered. So I think I will approve this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very decisive issue. We've heard a lot of passionate speakers from people who against this application, and we've heard many people for it. I was quite impressed with Mark Woods there, where he was talking about the young people of our city, giving them something to do between out of school and within school. And Neen Park, they do very well looking after that and attracting people. There is, at the moment, there is probably 6 months of the year where there's not a lot of activity going on. With this new facilities, it will draw people into the area, into the new building, and thinking about going with this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rush. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. As a substitute, it's quite interesting to come into this relatively late in the process and to hear all of the arguments. It's been interesting to see quite how strong the objectors' views are. And I've really fallen down into two areas where I've had concerns. On the first part, it's been about disability access. And I'm very pleased to hear from the chair of the trust that disability is absolutely in the forefront of what they're doing. So that side I'm no longer concerned about. I think that is dealt with effectively. The other issue, and it still remains one, is that of the transport impact and how vehicles are going to be kept away from private residences and from the residential streets, where people should be able to enjoy the quiet and peace and enjoyment of their own homes and not be bothered by huge amounts of traffic. I believe that they are going to do everything they possibly can to manage this, but I think it's something that we need to look at. But I don't think it's sufficiently concerning for me to be against the proposal. I think I will be voting to approve.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I've said it before, and I learn a lot from the Planning Environment Committee. I'm also aware that Climbing UK did produce an article about placing it on a brownfield site, and I think my heart would actually prefer that. But I'm also guided by the sequential testing approach. Now, we have to go with what our planning people, that is what they're there for, and we have to go with the evidence that is put before us. And I came to praise Caesar and to approve this site, and the passion and the arguments against it I was getting my spade out ready to bury Caesar and say no. Now, the only thing is I actually pay for parking at Ferry Meadows and was one of the first passes to be issued 3, 4, 5 years ago. And anybody who knows me knows I hate paying for parking. So the conservative with a small c in me will know that I don't like change as much as anybody else. But I've just looked at this, and the area itself is self-contained. If it wasn't for the height, if it wasn't for the location, I don't think any of us would actually be disagreeing about this. And I have to trust, Neen Park Trust, that they've got their business case right. They're going into this. They're doing it as a charitable enterprise, and as I say, no one is against it. It's a family destination, and I'm minded to think that people won't park on the side streets to jog into the park to use the climbing facility any more than they do now. It is a wicked issue. It does need to be monitored, and possibly as cars become more electric, then people will make the effort to use other methods of transport to get in there. But we have to do this on the here and now. And I think on balance, Neen Park Trust have done enough for me to suggest that we should be thinking about approving this as showing progress in the city, and hopefully the honeypot in the park becomes a honeypot for the city as we move forward. And I'll be voting in some ways reluctantly, but definitely for this to be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Iqbal.
Hi, and thank you, and through you, Chair. Very interesting. It's a very difficult planning committee I've ever been to. I mean, we have arguments from both sides, and it's very difficult to strike an accurate balance. However, I'm more minded to go towards the objectives because I believe that they put a very strong and persuasive case. They've actually addressed the issues, and they've highlighted the issues which have not been addressed appropriately by the people who are in favour of it. More or less, I would like to rely on Peterborough Civic Society, who do not raise concerns but raise objections about the location, design, scale, traffic and access, even though I know that traffic issues have been raised and have been addressed have been addressed by the officers, but not to the satisfactory extent that which I would have liked them to be addressed. I strongly believe that the objections raised by them, the reasoning they've given are valid, to the point, and they have substance. More or less, Waterville Parish also raised concerns. Ward councillors, I mean, I tend to give a lot of weight to the ward residents, merely for the fact that they are in the area, they are the starting point or the point of call for residents to actually highlight their concerns. Their concerns at the Ferry Meadow, if you look at the history of Ferry Meadow, it was a green place for people to come and enjoy for leisure, for recreation, and what the scheme is doing is taking that away from them, is taking that comfort away from them. So again, objections, if you look at it, there were about 457 objections, in support only 166. Now, there was a petition also signed, which was against it. It's about 1,112. Now, I understand from one of the speakers they didn't have enough time. If they had more time, the petition could have been increased. I know Nick Harding in his comments has addressed the issue whether who was in the petition and who's not in the petition. As far as I'm concerned, I think that's irrelevant because Ferry Meadow is a city-wide resort. It's for everyone, and I think everybody could raise a concern because I live in Central Ward, but I use Ferry Meadows, and it's to my heart, and I would like to be a part of it. So, saying that the people who've done the petition are not living within the area, I think that's irrelevant. It doesn't hold any water. I strongly believe that the objectors have got a very strong case. They are in favour of the scheme. They're not against it. I mean, nobody is doubting Neen Park Trust credibility, that they're not doing a wonderful job. Everybody's in favour of them. But what the issue is, the location. I mean, I don't think that Neen Park have looked at this and addressed the people's concerns the way they wanted to. I mean, location is the main issue here. And I strongly believe that my instinct says to me that I wouldn't jeopardise any green area, even though Councillor Jones has said that it's self-contained, that you jeopardise any green space and open area which was created for this purpose to generate any income or generate any revenue for the city. I think we should look elsewhere. On that basis, I'm not minded to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Bond.
Thank you very much. I know I've already spoken, but just I find myself agreeing a lot of what Councillor Iqbal says, and I do genuinely believe the residents have genuine concerns, which are obviously important to them. But I'm struggling because I think if we reject this today and it goes to appeal, for example, would we win the appeal based on the compromises and the planning situation? I honestly don't think we would. So I do agree with what you're saying, Councillor Iqbal, I really do, but I don't think that personally we can reject it. So I do completely, I am extremely sympathetic to the residents, and I agree with a lot of the points you just said, but it's a difficult one, isn't it?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Simons.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Having listened to all the arguments, I think it'd be an injustice for Peterborough if we didn't support this. To be honest, it's such a great facility for the city. And how often do we hear there's not enough things for people to do in Peterborough? Well, this is an opportunity that we can't turn down. Really, I will be supporting.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of address the highways situation, because that seems to be possibly the biggest bone of contention. So one of the objections that came up was about the construction of this, and you know, the heavy machinery going in and out to build this location. Nobody seemed to kind of adhere to the fact that, you know, they've only just built the Lakeside facility, and I don't think, as a local resident, I wasn't particularly impacted by construction of that, and nobody brought that up as an example as to why they felt that the construction would be an issue. I think that in the past that the Ferry Meadows has played host to numerous different events, be it the fireworks extravaganza, the cancer research, or the pink run, or whatever it is, that was done on a yearly basis, and various other events that happen through the year. So it has a rich history of putting on events at that location, and I've seen that those decline because they've the park has decided that actually it's been more about you know, the enjoyment of the park rather than particularly, you know, the fireworks are not particularly good for the wildlife, and so they've taken that away. And this is, in some respect, to my mind, is replacing that rather than augmenting, you know, on top of you know, what they've done in the past. So whilst yes, there will be times when there are, you know, there is some sort of congestion because there's an event on. I think it will be short-lived. I think we're kind of used to it from the East of England Showground. You know, as I said, Highways have looked into this, and they've assured us that whilst there may be some issues on a temporary, you know, sort of on a ad hoc basis, it's not going to be something that's long-lived or you know, a permanent thing. In the same way that if you were to put I don't know, an office park there where you've got cars on a daily basis going in and out, that's something that you've got to permanently deal with. So I don't really think that the issues with Highways has been proven. I think quite the contrary. I think actually it's an acceptable. It will be an acceptable level. You know, the objectives we're talking about. You know, this is going to be a great success, and you know, the place is going to be flooded with cars, and at the same time saying that actually nobody's going to come because it's out of date or what have you. And I suspect the reality is it's going to be somewhere in the middle. It's going to be well used, but it's not going to be overrun.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a point of information, really. I was under the impression, maybe I'm wrong, but the construction period is not part of the planning considerations that we should consider unless it relates to pollution. Is that right?
Chairman, do you want me to?
Yes, please, Nick.
If I might. The construction phase of a development in many respects is a given. The construction phase will always impact on people in some way. What we do usually put in place, and this development's no exception, is a construction management plan condition, and that is in order to sort of control the route in which construction traffic approaches the site, to agree the location of where materials and storage, sorry, the phone's going, is going to be located, and to control noise and dust and hours of operation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for clarification.
No problem. Anyone else want to enter into the debate? No, no more. Okay, thank you very much for your debate on that one. It is a tricky decision, without doubt. I think you can tell by the way you've debated that it's some of this is going to be an unbalanced view, and both sides have certainly given their all, and I thank them for that. Yeah, it's not an easy one to do, and that's why we're here. At the end of the day, we're here to weigh up all the facts that have been given to you, And as it's my duty to remind you that you are working on planning policy, although obviously you can't help but be affected by the passion of people when they're talking to you, and that's quite right that we hear that. So moving on from that, do I have a proposal? Okay, first up was Councillor Bond.
Yeah, I'm happy to support the officers' recommendations and go with everything they say, basically.
Straightforward. Seconder, please. Councillor Rush, is that you?
I would like to second it, but I did like to put, I don't want it to be what I mentioned about the colour scheme. I just would like them to look into it, see if it would be possible to change it, but I don't really want to make it a condition. I don't know how that would go.
Can I just clarify with Nick, is that not part of it anyway, part of the condition as I heard it?
Through you, Chairman, there is already a condition with regard to the materials to be used on the building.
Would you be satisfied with that, Councillor?
Yeah, I'll be satisfied with that. So I would like to second the original from Councillor Bond. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, committee, we have a proposal on the table. It's been seconded. For clarity, I'll ask each member in turn if they are for, against, or if they are abstaining. Councillor Bond.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Coles.
For.
Councillor Simons.
For.
Councillor Hogg.
For.
Councillor Hussain.
For.
Councillor Iqbal.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Rush.
For.
Councillor Warren.
For.
And myself, Councillor Harper, I'm for too. Over to you, please, for the result, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. That's 10 for and 1 against, so that is carried. The permission is granted.
That's it. So the planning permission is approved. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, everybody who's been on today, for those who were in objection, those who were for, and for everybody's input, your questions. The report was excellent. Thank you very much for that. I do appreciate that from officers. Very big and detailed report, but excellent. Presentations, like I said, were great. Questions, very, very good. And answers, of course, yeah, very good too. And the debate at the end was good too. So I do appreciate that. As I say, the application is now approved. That brings this meeting to an end. So if you could please